On a clear June morning in 1998, Danielle Morgan stepped out of her modest family home with a laugh that echoed lightly across the sunlit driveway. She wore her favorite pair of black sunglasses with delicate red hearts adorning the frames, a pair of worn jeans, and a white tank top that caught the soft breeze. The kind of carefree summer day that promised nothing but warmth and the simple pleasures of a slow afternoon. She told her mother she was heading into town for a quick coffee with a friend, her smile bright, her spirit unburdened by the shadows about to descend. But as the clock inched past noon, the town settled into an uneasy quiet. By 5 p.m., there was no sign of Danielle. Her cell phone rang and unanswered. By 7 p.m., her brother Mason was walking the lonely stretch of County Road 12, flashlight in hand, peering into the gathering dusk, hoping for a glimpse, a trace, anything that could explain the silence. When her car, a sleek black Camaro she washed every Saturday without fail, was officially declared missing the next morning, a knot tightened in the stomach of everyone who loved her. No tire marks, no fractured guardrails, no forgotten wallet at the roadside, no witness to her departure or arrival anywhere else. It was as though she had simply vanished into thin air. Early investigations yielded only whispers. The man she was supposed to meet, Clay Harrell, painted a picture of innocence as he gave his statement to the police. He denied seeing Danielle for weeks and claimed their relationship had dissolved amicably. Yet, beneath the surface, shadows lurked. Clay, the son of a local business owner, known for his involvement in the church and the operator of a bustling auto body shop, became a figure etched in public sorrow as he organized vigils and cried openly on camera. The town grieved, but the trail went cold. 2 years later, Danielle's shimmering presence faded from front pages to bumper stickers. And by 2004, the storage lot where her Camaro would later be discovered was quietly sold, its ties to her story severed from the public eye. Mason Morgan, however, never ceased to seek the truth. His search was not a fleeting quest for attention, but a slow-burning blaze fueled by unyielding love and determination. He pored over dusty police records, haunted abandoned lots, followed every lead, no matter how faint. The photograph of Danielle, once tucked safely in his wallet until the edges yellowed with time, became his talisman in a battle against darkness. Then, in May 2010, fate stirred when a contractor named Vince Ramirez stumbled upon a foreclosed storage unit auctioned off just 2 towns south. Expecting old tires or forgotten mattresses, he was instead met with a grim discovery: a '97 black Camaro, cloaked in thick dust but locked with a rusted padlock, its keys startlingly still in the ignition. No signs of forced entry or blood. The vehicle, preserved against time yet marked by a single, chilling blemish. A clean bullet hole piercing the hood like a dark omen. Beside it, a faint smiley face traced delicately in the dust, a cruel signature from an unseen hand. Mason's breath caught when he saw the photograph of the car, a silent witness to years of vanished hope. The dust layering the vehicle was too light for 12 years, its recent handling undeniable. Police found partial fingerprints on the driver's door and trunk, none a match. A long blonde hair, unmistakably Danielle's, slipped free from the passenger seatbelt's clasp. The glove box resisted all attempts to open it, sealed securely as if guarding a final secret. In the depths beneath the driver's seat, Mason uncovered a cheap silver lighter, a perplexing discovery from a non-smoker. Official records showed the Camaro had never been retitled, left untouched in the shadows for over a decade. When Mason confronted Clay Harrell, expecting remorse or answers, he met an indifferent gaze. Clay's calm denial of proximity or involvement clashed painfully with the truth lurking in Mason's hands. A grainy photograph taken just days before Danielle's disappearance, her laughter stolen and frozen in time, with a shadowy figure that could only be one man. Clay's dismissive claim that she had driven away to nowhere seldom believed fell on deaf ears when a tape recorder revealed Danielle's trembling voice confessing fear and betrayal, the knowledge she possessed and little hope she'd survive it. Her voice was a thread pulling Mason deeper into a web far darker than mere disappearance. He played her final desperate message, a whisper of warning embedded in static. The presence of a broker, a name unknown but suffocatingly real. Watching, controlling, and waiting. Night fell heavy over Mason's thoughts as he sat in the Camaro. the ghostly echo of Danielle's voice entwined with the terrifying smiley face, a symbol not of mockery, but of a silent, unrelenting threat. Each rewind of the tape unveiled new layers of fear, a faint metal clang and harsh southern drawl punctuating her pleas, the voice of an accomplice, a man alive with sinister purpose. Mason's world narrowed as he pieced together a nightmarish puzzle extending beyond a single man's malice to a shadow organization wielding power and silence. His careful notes and investigative leads drew the attention of those who preferred secrets buried, marked by break-ins where nothing was stolen but crucial evidence vanished, locks turned by hands with keys no one knew existed. Escape was a strategy not just for Danielle, but for every survivor and seeker of truth ensnared by the broker's invisible web. The discovery of storage units and secret meetings, cryptic ledgers, and a shadowy network hinted at a reality too vast to confront alone. Names circled thrice in fear and defiance, drawings that whispered of cleanup operations and new smiles freshly drawn in the dust beside fatal bullet holes. Mason and his allies uncovered forgotten faces, coded messages, sheltering hands, and the lurking presence of those willing to kill to protect a deadly enterprise stretching across state lines. Even as the evidence mounted, injustice seemed within grasp, the elusive broker remained a phantom, always present, watching, waiting, smiling in the shadows. Yet the spark of resilience burned in those who refused to be silenced, promising a reckoning for Danielle, for all the missing, and for a truth long clawing its way from the depths of a 12-year silence into a spotlight it could no longer evade. Mason Morgan's world had irrevocably shifted with the discovery of Danielle's car. But the road ahead was laden with shadowy threats and unanswered questions. The tape, her voice trembling with raw fear and desperate hope, had reopened wounds the town had long tried to forget. As the night deepened, Mason sat alone in his truck, the dim glow of the dashboard barely illuminating the folder filled with fragile photographs, faded receipts, and the cassette tape he had played over and over. Every whisper of the past echoed louder in the present. The name broker, the fresh smiley face on the dusty hood, the bullet hole that wasn't from an accident. It was a language made up of fear, control, and a relentless effort to warn those left behind. Morning light crept into Mason's cluttered living room, nudging him back to a reality where time was both enemy and ally. The first rays pierced through drawn curtains, casting a glow on the myriad of notes, forged connections, and scrupulous records he had amassed. He pulled the well-worn ledger from Danielle's circle of confidants, entries meticulously written in her hand. Names, dates, storage units, cryptic warnings. Unit 19 stood out, encircled thrice with urgency. "Don't trust anyone if they know about it," she had warned. The ominous message seemed both a plea and a prediction, a flicker of clarity amid layers of secrets. Mason's phone buzzed with a call that sent a chill down his spine. The voice was firm, commanding, unmistakably Clay Harrell's. The private number was yet unlisted in his contacts, and Mason let it roll to voicemail, heart pounding with a cocktail of dread and defiance. When he listened to the message, his jaw clenched. Harrell's calm tone and veiled warning carried the weight of a man encased in his own web of lies and fear. "You keep chasing ghosts, Mason. You're going to find one that bites back. Let the past stay buried, or someone's going to get hurt." The veiled threat was a cruel reminder how deadly the depths of this conspiracy ran. There was no turning back now. Mason knew that each step forward drew him deeper into a labyrinth where trust was scarce and shadows whispered betrayal. He redoubled his efforts to unravel the network, determined to shield Danielle's memory and expose the sinister undercurrents she had dared to resist. He reached out to Ellie Mazer, the relentless reporter who had haunted the story since 1998. Ellie's eyes reflected the raw determination of a woman burning with a thirst for justice. Without hesitation, she accepted Mason's trove of evidence: the gas station receipt bearing Clay's name, the secreted cassette tape, photos revealing the underbelly of Bain Freight's operations, and the ledger chronicling months of a silent battle. Ellie wasted no time, her investigative instincts slicing through layers of silence and fear. As the tape played amidst the clatter of the Waffle House, Danielle's voice shattered the still air, revealing names whispered in dread, connections that unraveled the fabric of a dark, hidden world. Each word was a thread pulling them toward a truth others had fought to bury. In Mason's hands, Danielle's photograph from 3 days before she vanished grew heavier with forgotten meaning. In the background, an unmarked silver SUV appeared again, a vehicle tying her fate with baying freight, with Clay Harrell and a man known only by whispers, the broker. The suspected puppet master who orchestrated a monstrous scheme, whose reach extended far beyond local shadows. Mason pored through leads, documents, and diaries, piecing together the secrets Danielle had painstakingly gathered. Her entries spoke of fear cloaked in silence, of whispered warnings ignored, and of the sickening realization that she was being hunted by forces far more powerful than anyone dared admit. Together with Ellie, Mason visited Sierra, a former Bain employee whose trembling hands and haunted eyes told of unspeakable pressure. Her recollections painted a chilling portrait of the control exerted by the Harrell family and their enablers. Voices silenced, threats issued, friendships turned to shackles. Sierra's notebook, entrusted to Mason's care, brimmed with names, cryptic initials, and reminders not to trust those who knew too much. The ledger adding new pieces to the sprawling puzzle. CH said she was just another cleanup, but he looked scared, said the smile was new. The smile, repeated in the dust on the Camaro, traced over bullet holes, a symbol of fear rather than mockery. But the story grew darker still. Discovery of a concealed freezer room behind the diner, locked and silent, where Sierra recalled drivers vanishing into the shadows, where cold concrete floors whispered secrets. Mason and state police, led by Officer Langley, forced the entry only to find a woman curled in herself, fragile, silent, marked by bruises, speaking only of Danielle and a plea to not let him find me. It was a moment frozen in time, a haunting echo of Danielle's suffering and a chilling confirmation of their worst fears. This wasn't just about Clay. The broker was no myth, but a real, present terror controlling unseen corners of their lives. Strings pulled tighter, mysteries deepened. Clay Harrell vanished under the cloak of night, his offices stripped of Sam, evidence shredded, electronic trails wiped clean. But not all was gone. The eerie message taped inside his desk drawer spoke volumes. Smile, she's still watching. It was not a taunt, but a manifestation of dread. A silent scream from someone running without rest, from an open secret too dangerous to face. Yet power isn't always visible. It lies in whispers, in shadows, and in the silences between the words spoken in hidden rooms. Through the veil of fear, Mason and Ellie pressed forward, following the trail left by those who came before, voices lost or silenced but never forgotten. The mysterious broker defied exposure, an enigma amid a constellation of fear and complicity, while Mason guarded Danielle's legacy, a torchbearer determined to light the darkest corners with truth. Every thread Mason pulled revealed a hidden network of complicity, unseen hands in the background, veiled alliances, threats cloaked in silence. The canopy of protection surrounding the broker was vast but not impenetrable. The tenacity of a brother's love, a reporter's persistence, and a survivor's voice stirred ripples in the stagnant waters of fear. The danger was real, the stakes higher than Mason could have imagined. But the truth demanded to be heard. And with every whispered name, every uncovered lie, the walls surrounding Danielle's fate trembled. Wherever the broker lurked, Mason vowed to unmask him, to shatter the looming silence that had bound his sister and so many others for far too long. The nightmare had begun years ago, but the reckoning was now. The time for silence was over, and the fight for justice had only just begun. The relentless pursuit of truth had pulled Mason Morgan deep into a world veiled by years of fear, deceit, and shadows heavier than he had ever imagined. The mysterious broker remained a name whispered only in desperation, an unseen force orchestrating a sinister web that had ensnared Danielle and countless others long before her disappearance. Mason found himself standing at the edge of a quiet town, in front of a dilapidated building that once hummed with the daily grind of Bain Freight's operations. The rusted sign creaked softly in the wind as he pushed open the heavy door, stepping into the stale air of a long-abandoned office strewn with forgotten papers and the remnants of a time better left behind. Every inch of the walls seemed to echo with stories unspoken, promises broken, and the weight of silence too long endured. Ellie Mazer followed close behind, her seasoned eyes scanning the room, a mix of determination and exhaustion folding her features like the crinkled newspaper clippings she carried. This place was a graveyard for secrets, and Mason could almost hear Danielle's voice threading through the dust, calling him forward, demanding justice for the years stolen in silence. Their investigation unearthed hidden ledgers, handwritten notes bearing faint traces of Danielle's own hand, and a worn receipt linking Clay Harrell unambiguously with Unit 19, the very storage unit where Danielle's car had been found nearly a dozen years after her disappearance. But the complexity compounded when Mason cross-referenced employee lists and discovered multiple other young women missing, under similar circumstances, all tied in some way to the sprawling network controlled or influenced by Clay and those above him. Names were erased from the public record, stories were smothered by fear and bribery, and witnesses lived in quiet shadows, afraid to speak lest they too be swallowed by darkness. One night, Mason received an encrypted email filled with blurry, shaky video footage recording a chilling scene, voices low and commanding, shadows moving with calculated menace. The calm voice ordering, "Get her in the car, no photos, no questions," followed by the static and blackness, chilled Mason to his core. The familiar drawl, unmistakable even through the static, was Clay's voice. This wasn't just a disappearance. This was a systematic silencing. Mason and Ellie handed the harrowing footage to Officer Langley, only to be met with skepticism and the bureaucratic frustrations of evidentiary limitations. Timestamp flaws and unverifiable sources rendered the video unusable in court, and investigations had to pivot to evidence concrete enough to stand under scrutiny. Mason returned to the Camaro one more time, now under police custody, and found taped beneath the dashboard a tiny plastic recorder labeled ominously as "Backup, Do Not Play." He couldn't resist. The voice that emerged was frantic and clear, revealing Danielle's discoveries of deeper conspiracies and naming the broker as an ominous puppet master who controlled and manipulated from the shadows. The last words echoed with desperation and warning before the recording abruptly ended. The threat wasn't just real, it was immediate. Days later, Ellie's apartment was ransacked with nothing stolen, but every folder and file connected to their investigation disappeared, taken with uncanny precision. Whoever broke in held keys and knowledge far too intimate for a casual criminal. Mason and Ellie grasped the gravity of their plight. They weren't simply uncovering a cold case, but igniting a conflagration that powerful, dangerous forces sought fiercely to extinguish. The hunt for the broker intensified with no clear leads, but a clue surfaced in the form of masking tape notation found inside Clay's abandoned desk. "Smile. She's still watching." It was no taunt. It was a gesture of fear, of running from a truth too perilous to face head-on. The age-old game of predator and prey was shifting, and Mason was caught in the crosshairs. But as Mason sifted through the haunting remains of Bain Freight's shipping manifests, he noted the involvement of Clay's cousin, Darren K. Harrell, a shadowy figure with a history that suggested deeper complicity. The cousin who filed the 1995 missing person report on another young woman, Riley Dwight, a girl who disappeared after a party linked to the same dark network. Darren's trajectory followed a path from local law enforcement to private security and ownership of a secluded survivalist compound, silent except for rumors and the occasional whispered warning. When police raided the compound, the place was stripped bare but not empty. They found chilling evidence: stacks of VHS tapes labeled only by cryptic initials, missing person flyers stained with age, blood, and desperate hope. Among them was Ellie's own flyer, a stark and painful reminder that the web ensnared more victims than anyone had dared admit. One tape revealed Clay talking about moving Danielle to Darren's compound as too much trouble, signaling attempts to isolate and bury the truth behind thick walls and colder shadows. The trail grew colder when Clay disappeared under the veil of an early morning escape in a white Dodge truck with keys to nowhere and no route back. The engine that once burned now silenced in a burned-out truck, the sole residue, a burner phone, and a charred note. "Ask Darren." The query haunted Mason. Who was Darren, and what place did he occupy in a ruthless, sprawling conspiracy? Mason and Ellie dug deeper, unraveling connections and poison trails, revealing that the broker's grasp extended far beyond storage units and missing girls. They uncovered a terrifying nexus of power, corruption, and violence determined to hide truth in silence and shadows. Yet within the darkness, flecks of light persisted, whispers from survivors, hidden recordings, and unwavering voices of those refusing to be forgotten. Danielle's story, Mason understood, was not an isolated tragedy but a fragile thread knitted into a vast, malevolent tapestry. Each discovery brought more peril, but also more clarity, a call to arms for justice that could not be silenced. Time questioned, trust faltered, and threats loomed. But for Mason, for Ellie, and for all searching for the missing truth, turning back was no longer an option. The broker's mask was slipping, and the final act was drawing near. The echoes of a dozen years of silence cried for justice and reckoning, and those listening would no longer be silent. The fight had entered a new, perilous phase, but Mason was ready to face every shadow, every whispered threat, knowing Danielle's voice and the countless others depended on him to finish what had begun long ago. The steady unraveling of the mystery surrounding Danielle Morgan's disappearance rippled far beyond what Mason could have ever anticipated. With unsettling clarity, the tangled threads of the case revealed a wider conspiracy, one that seemed to stretch its insidious grip into places no one dared to look. The latest breakthroughs had given Mason and Ellie new direction, but also drew new threats and dangers with a ferocity that chilled the soul. The shadows they chased were no longer simple absences or whispers, but dark, living forces actively working to silence and erase every trace of the broker's treacheries. In the center of it all was the chilling realization that Danielle was not simply a victim, but a brave resistor, silenced in body but vocal in spirit through the secret tapes and hidden ledgers she had left behind. Mason knew the fight was no longer just for her justice, but for all the lost souls still trapped in this loathsome network. On a chilly autumn morning, Mason and Ellie met with Officer Langley at a discreet location outside the city. Langley had become their steadfast ally, navigating the labyrinthine corridors of law enforcement bureaucracy and bringing their evidence closer to official recognition. He handed them a folder containing the results of forensic analysis, including voice matches from the tapes, confirmation that the partial prints on Danielle's Camaro matched those of none other than Clay Harrell himself, and the disturbing discovery of unknown male DNA traced to the passenger side of the vehicle. This was no longer speculation. It was undeniable proof of criminal collusion and multiple accomplices within the shadow network they were exposing. While the forensics firm worked tirelessly, Mason turned his focus to the mysterious man named Carl Merton, an elusive broker whose name Danielle had unearthed from old files tied to Bain Freight. According to records, Carl had been a regional loan officer with a seemingly unremarkable career before disappearing under a cloud of suspicion and changing identity in the early 2000s. His supposed death in a Texas car accident in 2009 had gone largely unnoticed, uninvestigated, and unchallenged, a quiet exit for a man whose true role remained obscured. Mason and Ellie pored over documents, communications, and witness accounts, suggesting that Carl was the broker's operational core, overseeing a network that trafficked and concealed victims with an iron fist and a velvet glove. His reach was far and his influence deep, weaving through local businesses, private security, and those armed with silence. The terrifying realization was that this network wasn't simply a local or regional criminal enterprise, but a calculated, systematic machine geared toward control and subjugation, masked under layers of legitimate-looking businesses and community ties. Every time Mason thought they were making progress, new puzzles emerged. Storage units suddenly emptied or burned to the ground, important files and diaries stolen or shredded with professional precision, and anonymous messages warning them in cryptic phrases to back off or disappear. The weight of those threats echoed in every unspoken glance and furtive step they took. But Mason's resolve remained unshaken. He and Ellie kept unearthing evidence pointing to a sinister chain of command, a hierarchy cloaked in fear and violence, protecting a secret too profitable and dangerous to ever see daylight completely. The whispered moniker of the broker sounded more like a cult leader than a mere individual, commanding loyalty through intimidation, silencing dissent with disappearances, and keeping the wheels turning through unseen and unknown actors, some perhaps hidden within law enforcement itself. Ellie's investigative instincts led them to Sierra, a former employee who had witnessed the beginning stages of the operation from the inside. Her recollections of Bain Freight painted a haunting portrait of control, how new drivers were carefully vetted, choices limited, and voices stifled. A culture of fear had been cultivated long before Danielle's disappearance. Her inquiries and growing suspicion had marked her as a threat too dangerous to exist freely. Sierra's broken trust and hesitation underscored the oppressive atmosphere, revealing just how far the network extended into lives it sought to dominate. With her help, Mason located an abandoned diner, long shuttered, whose back rooms and corridors held chilling secrets. Frozen behind locked doors were bindings of cruelty and desperate captivity, places where victims were hidden from the world, forgotten and forsaken. The discovery of fresh footprints, the faint sounds of movement, and the muted echoes of distant cries breathed new urgency into Mason's mission. The forged documents and carefully maintained ledgers uncovered provided a grim ledger of human suffering beneath the facade of legitimate business operations. Fielding the constant threat of being watched or followed, Mason orchestrated careful surveillance and countermeasures, realizing that even their smallest slip could lead to permanent silence. In a harrowing raid coordinated with state police, Mason and Langley uncovered a female victim hidden in the back rooms of the network's holdings, her frail form a living testament to the cruelty unfolding behind closed doors. Her whispered name, Danielle, and her trembling plea not to be found spoke volumes of the horror still lurking in quiet corners. This rescue, though small, represented a victory. They had saved a life, revealing a crack in the impenetrable wall of fear and secrecy. Yet the broker remained elusive. His identity unknown, his network sprawling and deep-rooted, he continued to pull strings and erase footprints. Mason's conviction only hardened with every passing day that justice would come only when the full truth was exposed, when every name, every face emerged from the shadows. But with every step closer came the increasing cost of defiance. More vanished witnesses, more threats, more broken lives caught in the tide. Ellie's journalistic tenacity bore fruit in unexpected ways. Hidden photographs resurfaced, secret meetings unveiled, financial papers showing transactions and cover-ups. The tangled web was unraveling, only to entwine even further with powerful players hiding behind respectable titles. Mason's communication with the authorities was fraught with obstruction, half-truths, and deliberate delays. The battle was not just against criminals, but against systems designed to protect the powerful. The same systems that had allowed Danielle and others to disappear without recourse. In the quiet moments between chaos, Mason reflected on the cost of truth. He thought of Danielle's final recordings, the voice of a young woman who foresaw her doom, yet still fought to leave behind a testament to those shadows seeking to silence her forever. The balance between hope and despair rang in his heart as he pledged to honor her courage by pushing onward, regardless of the price. The story had grown beyond one missing woman. It was now an epic struggle against an unyielding darkness stretching across time and space, demanding sacrifice and unrelenting courage. Mason knew this was just the beginning of a journey that could reshape lives, expose evil, and refuse to let silence claim another victim. In the face of unknown enemies, Mason's resolve crystallized, a relentless battle for justice fueled by the voices of those who could no longer speak, and the hope that their stories would one day be heard. The weight of the investigation now pressed heavily on Mason Morgan's shoulders, more than ever before. The pieces of Danielle's story had formed a dark mosaic of exploitation, fear, and hidden power. Yet the heart of the mystery remained obscured behind layers of deception. As daylight faded into a cool twilight, Mason found himself once again retracing footsteps around the edges of Bain Freight's abandoned properties, each step echoing with the memories of voices that refused to be silenced. The elusive broker's true identity, a shadow nearly tangible yet always slipping beyond reach, haunted every whispered conversation and every uncovered ledger. With Ellie Mazur's unwavering support, Mason was determined to unearth not just the broker's name, but to expose the network's full extent, no matter the cost. Late one evening, Mason received an anonymous tip via encrypted message. directing him to a remote warehouse on the outskirts of the town. The coordinates led him through overgrown fields and crumbling industrial zones to a decrepit building marked only by rust and faded paint. The sharp scent of bleach and rust clung to the air, a silent marker for those who knew the space's purpose as secure storage. Access was tightly controlled, with only a select few holding keys, a fact whispered about uneasily by locals who dared mention the place at all. Mason's heart thudded as he stepped cautiously through the creaking doors, his flashlight slicing through the thick darkness. Every shadow seemed alive, every creak a whisper of untold horrors hidden within the cold concrete walls. Inside, Mason found rows of freezer units long unplugged, their insides now vesseled to decay and grime. Behind the last freezer lay a narrow steel door that seemed almost unnaturally pristine despite the surrounding neglect. His breath thickened as he reached out to test the cold metal. It was locked, impenetrable, save for the faintest echoes of movement and muffled noises behind its surface. Scuff marks on the dusty floors suggested desperation or struggle, recent and raw. Mason wasted no time in summoning Officer Langley and a tactical team, knowing the stakes had never been higher. The crew moved swiftly, cutting away barriers and freeing what they hoped would be truth and survivors. The moment the door swung open revealed a young woman shrouded in silence and shadows, her eyes a vast ocean of pain and fear. Skin bruised and pale, trembling hands barely able to lift her veil of despair, she spoke only the name Danielle on trembling lips. It was a jarring confrontation with reality. The broker's grip was far from broken, but this fragile life was a beacon of hope that justice could still emerge from the tangled darkness. Mason vowed silently, as paramedics tended to her, that no fear or threat would hold them back, not with a voice so broken, but so brave echoing the truth. The investigation now had flesh and blood, but the man at its center remained at large. Clay Harrell had disappeared, his trail cold like the winter streets. Rumors spoke of new identities, buried secrets, and those close to Clay warned of a meticulously orchestrated cover-up. It wasn't just Clay anymore. Mason uncovered unrelenting ties to Darren K. Harrell, Clay's cousin, the one who first reported another missing girl years earlier, who shifted from law enforcement to shadowy private security, and whose isolated compound held cold evidence of unspoken horrors. With every door Mason and Ellie forced open, they stumbled upon stifled screams and frozen stories. VHS tapes meticulously labeled with cryptic initials, missing person flyers stained with sorrow and blood, and dirt-laden ledgers meticulously maintained spoke of a legacy of pain the brokers sought desperately to bury. Among the victims was Ellie herself, a haunting truth that shattered the illusion of safety and galvanized resolve. Slowly, the full spectrum of the broker's operation was revealed, a vast empire of control, fear, and suffering camouflaged beneath the veil of legitimate business. The inescapable truth was that this was not merely a criminal enterprise, but a fortress of oppression, wielding power to break and silence. Facing this realization, Mason felt the icy brush of danger creep ever closer. Threats became more explicit, shadows lengthened with ominous intent, and those closest to the truth found themselves standing on the precipice of annihilation. Ellie's investigative trail wound through archives and interviews, reawakening suppressed memories and stirring fresh fears. Powerful forces with vested interests fought ferociously to contain the damage, shutting down stories, silencing witnesses, and weaving official narratives designed to dispense with inconvenient truths. Yet, within the darkness, the resilience of the human spirit blazed bright. Voices once lost murmured urgently on secret tapes. Diaries and ledgers carried secrets flaming in the night, desperate to ignite change. Mason and Ellie became the custodians of these fractured hopes, wielding their determination like a shield against the relentless tide of oppression. They understood that to expose the broker meant to confront not only criminals hiding in shadows, but entire systems built on silence, complicity, and exploitation. The broker's name, still unknown, grew heavier with every discovery, an unseen tyrant whose realm stretched across lives and years, whose reach defied simple boundaries. The fight was no longer personal. It was a stand against a monster cultivated in plain sight. Every masked smile, every dusty fingerprint, every coded ledger was a thread in a tapestry of cruelty too vast for one person. But Mason and Ellie were undeterred. They pledged to be the final chapter in a story that spanned years of lost childhood, stolen innocence, and the unending search for justice. As autumn turned to winter, the case commanded greater attention and darker shadows. The broker and his associates adapted swiftly, burrowing deeper into secrecy, striking harder at those who dared intrude. Mason and Ellie found themselves hunted, their allies scarce, their nights restless. Yet their cause grew stronger with every revelation, igniting whispers across communities all too familiar with loss and silence. Together they steeled themselves for a battle of wills, resolution tempered by fear, hope forged through pain. Danielle's voice, once a fragile whisper trapped in a cassette, now roared within Mason's heart. She had dared to defy the broker, to fight for truth in the face of unthinkable danger, and Mason vowed that neither her sacrifice nor the sacrifices of the countless others would be in vain. The shadows would be pierced, the silence broken, and justice would rise from the depths of a 12-year nightmare. The broker's empire of control trembled as the light crept closer. Mason Morgan, against all odds, was determined to bring the final curtain down on a story that demanded to be heard. A story of courage, betrayal, and the indomitable power of truth. As the relentless search for the broker and the dark network controlling Danielle Morgan's disappearance reached its zenith, Mason Morgan found himself swallowed deeper into a labyrinth where the lines between ally and enemy blurred beyond recognition. The battle for truth was no longer waged only in quiet investigations and secret meetings, but on the edge of danger where trust was a luxury few could afford, and every revelation brought new peril. The story, once confined to a single girl's vanishing, had grown into a sprawling narrative of manipulation, violence, and decades-long cover-ups that stretched across towns, families, and institutions. Mason's phone buzzed late one rainy night, a number unlisted and unfamiliar. The message was brief but electrifying. "We need to meet. I have proof that will unravel everything. But be careful, they're watching." The cryptic warning propelled Mason into motion, driving through slick streets that gleamed under streetlights, heavy with rain, his mind racing with the weight of what this meeting could mean. He arrived at a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of town, its imposing silhouette flickering like a ghost in the fog. The scent of damp concrete and rust lingered in the cold air as he stepped inside to find a figure waiting in the half-shadows. The man introduced himself simply as Reuben, a former driver tangled in Bain Freight's shadowy operations. His eyes bore the wear of someone who had carried secrets far heavier than his own shoulders. With trembling hands, Reuben handed Mason a faded, weathered notebook, an unassuming ledger that documented months of illicit activities, coded entries, vehicle logs, and cryptic notations. "Danielle entrusted this to me before she was taken," Reuben whispered hoarsely. "She wanted someone to keep it safe, to fight for what we never could." The notebook was a cry from the darkness, a testament to a battle against suffocating silence that had claimed too many voices before Danielle's. Driven by newfound urgency, Mason shared the ledger with Ellie Mazer, whose investigative flame burned even brighter as layers of the conspiracy peeled back. Joining forces with Langley and local authorities, they traced the inked initials and coded maps to a series of clandestine locations scattered around the county. Forests obscured by towering pines, forgotten cabins, and shuttered warehouses that once hid tortured truths beneath their rotting exteriors. Each site unveiled artifacts, discarded personal belongings, faded photographs, and objects marked with traces of Danielle's life and others who had vanished under ominous circumstances. Mason pieced together a haunting timeline, marked by disappearances, cover-ups, and a network so ruthless it eradicated witnesses with surgical precision. Names emerged from the shadows, Ellie herself included, a tapestry of victims whose stories intertwined within the same brutal dance of exploitation. The raw notebook entries hinted at betrayals and hidden deals, the flickering smiley face appearing again and again, a symbol transformed from benign whimsy into an emblem of fear, control, and relentless surveillance. As Mason delved deeper, dark clouds gathered around the edges of truth. He uncovered a stained receipt, signed by Clay Harrell just days before Danielle vanished, linking her last known movements to a labyrinth of illicit cargo transport and whispered exchanges behind closed doors. Hidden recordings revealed conversations between accomplices, planning movements of victims with chilling coldness, branding those who resisted as problems to be cleaned. The impression was clear. Danielle's disappearance was just a single thread unraveling from a much larger orchestrated machine. The patterns of destruction surfaced audibly alongside the physical evidence. Vital documents and harrowing videos were stolen, offices ransacked by unseen hands, intimidations waved like dark flags over anyone daring to seek the light. The encrypted messages, accessible only to those brave enough to listen, bore the chilling knowledge that this fight was against more than flesh and blood. It was against a pervasive, systemic evil thriving beneath innocent visages. Facing these relentless pressures, Mason knew the stakes had risen dangerously high. Shadowy escorts and unmarked vehicles trailed every move. Friends grew cautious, and time blurred in a whirlwind of half-truths and frantic urgency. But Mason's resolve, fortified by Danielle's voice and the countless silenced cries, could not be broken. He refused to let fear halt the march toward justice, knowing that the broker's facade was crumbling beneath the growing weight of evidence. Late one evening, Mason received an encrypted call from an unexpected source, a woman claiming to be among the vanished, survivors caught in the fugitive net of the broker's dominion. Her words trembled with pain, but also with fierce hope, recounting harrowing escapes, forced silence, and the burden of living between worlds, known yet unheard. Her testimony provided pieces of the puzzle that no investigation had uncovered, fragments of a vast trafficking ring coupled with unsettling parallels to the missing, the disappeared, and the suppressed. With this revelation, the investigation shifted from a local tragedy toward the threshold of a large-scale operation drawing national attention. Law enforcement agencies, pressured by mounting evidence and public sentiment, intensified their efforts, but were met by resistance from a formidable network weaving influence through courts, businesses, and government offices. Tainted with fear and coercion, informants rarely surfaced, and witnesses remained endangered by ever-present threats. Yet, amid the darkness, Mason found unexpected allies. Survivors, once hidden in the shadows, stepped forward, emboldened by the promise of truth and protection. Families long divided by fear reunited, their shared loss transformed into shared strength. Ellie's reports broke through layers of obfuscation, reaching wider audiences than ever before, sparking outrage and demand for accountability. News outlets circulated the story with growing fervor, the smiley face, a sinister symbol turned rallying cry, becoming omnipresent in public discourse. Demonstrations, vigils, and community meetings erupted, giving voice to years of silenced grief. The power of collective memory, combined with a steadfast refusal to forget, forced authorities to respond, shaking the foundations of a network built on the fragile pillars of complicity. In a climactic series of raids, coordinated by state and federal agents, key nodes of the broker's empire were dismantled. The secret storage units, the shadowed compounds, and the hushed corridors of corrupt power. Perpetrators once shielded by anonymity faced the stark light of justice, their webs torn asunder by relentless pursuit and unwavering testimony. Yet, even as the dawn of justice brightened the horizon, Mason understood this was only the beginning of healing. Countless lives remained scarred, fragile trust shattered, and healing hung precariously in the balance. The broker, though diminished, remained an enduring symbol of the darkness humanity must face if it is to walk in the light. As the case closed its first chapter, Mason and Ellie stood amidst a community transformed, scarred but resilient, honoring Danielle and others through acts of remembrance and fierce commitment to vigilance. The journey had claimed much, but promised more. A steadfast fight against silence, a promise to hold power accountable, and a testament to the courage that kindles in the face of unimaginable darkness. Danielle's voice, immortalized in fragile tapes and etched memories, became a beacon, lighting the way for those who might yet be lost, and a solemn reminder that even in the deepest shadows, truth can find its way into the daylight. Mason's pledge was clear: to carry forward that light, to stand with the forgotten, and to ensure that no story like Danielle's would ever be buried in silence again. The chilling revelations surrounding Danielle Morgan's disappearance continued to resonate throughout the community, sparking a desperate search for final pieces of a puzzle that had become a symbol of deep-seated corruption and sinister networks. Despite the mounting evidence against Clay Harrell, Darren Harrell, and the elusive broker, the greatest threat lay in the unknown, the shadow of collusion and the enduring influence of those determined to protect their secrets at any cost. Mason Morgan, driven by love and justice, faced an unyielding tide of resistance but refused to yield. The fight was no longer his alone. It had evolved into a movement, a call for truth that reverberated well beyond the borders of a single town. The somber tone of winter had settled over the landscape when Mason received an urgent message from Ellie. "Meet me at the county library. New evidence has surfaced." Racing through streets glistening with frost, Mason arrived with heart pounding and cautious anticipation. Ellie awaited him in the shadowed corner of the basement archive, her face lit by the soft glow of a reading lamp and the flickering screen of her laptop. As she unveiled digital scans of documents and photographs, Mason's breath caught. The images were grainy yet unmistakable. Surveillance photos showing meetings between Bain Freight personnel and shadowy figures whose faces were obscured, yet whose presence screamed authority and menace. The documents traced covert communications, hints of transactions passing through offshore accounts, carefully masked by layers of corporate obfuscation. It was the financial heartbeat of the broker's dark empire. Among the newly unearthed revelations was a trove of intercepted messages, meticulously decoded by an independent cybersecurity expert secretly aiding Mason and Ellie. The messages implicated local officials, business owners, and law enforcement officers, those who once swore oaths to protect the innocent but had instead been complicit in silence and deceit. The broker's reach was unmistakable, a web entangling the very institutions designed to uphold justice. Every contact, every transaction, every whispered conversation painted a portrait of a system designed to shield the guilty and silence the brave. Fueled by these discoveries, Mason's resolve deepened. Together with Ellie, Langley, and a dedicated task force, they prepared for an unprecedented operation. A coordinated sweep targeting the broker's known hideouts and the powerful individuals enabling his reign. The pressure, however, was immense. Threats escalated with chilling frequency, anonymous notes left on windshields, vehicles followed by unmarked cars, homes broken into with nothing taken but a clear message: stop or disappear. Each act of intimidation was a calculated attempt to derail their pursuit and incite fear that might fracture their unity. But Mason, emboldened by his sister's undying spirit and the growing solidarity among survivors and advocates, pressed forward. Public interest swelled as local media picked up the story, breaking the silence with relentless scrutiny and unyielding questions. Community members held vigils, rallies, and forums, lending voices to those who had long been silenced and demanding accountability from those in power. The smiley face, once a mark of haunting threat, evolved into a symbol of resistance, courage, and collective grief. The climax of the investigation approached as Mason's team closed in on the broker's last known stronghold, a sprawling estate concealed behind high walls and surveillance cameras, where silence was enforced with lethal precision. Undercover operatives confirmed the presence of key figures in the network, accompanied by detailed plans for continued illicit operations camouflaged as legitimate business dealings. The stakes had never been higher. A single misstep could cost lives and forever obscure the truth. In a groundbreaking nighttime raid coordinated across multiple agencies, officers stormed the compound. The operation was swift and decisive, leaving the criminal nexus in ruins. Weapons caches, evidence of trafficking, financial ledgers, and electronic files were seized, revealing the full extent of the broker's empire, an interconnected syndicate exploiting power, influence, and fear to prey on the vulnerable. Key suspects, including high-ranking officials previously shielded by anonymity, were apprehended, facing charges that sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. Yet for Mason, the victory was bittersweet. The survivor's scars ran deep, and the healing process would be long and arduous. Danielle's voice remained etched in his memory, a haunting reminder of lives lost, pain endured, and the resilience of those left behind. Families reunited, testimonies given, and justice sought amid the ashes of betrayal. The broker's empire was broken, but its remnants lingered in the wounds carried by the survivors and the undeniable legacy of courage. Ellie's reporting continued, illuminating the darkness with unflinching honesty, chronicling the fight to dismantle systemic evil and honor the truth unmasked. Community support blossomed into organized movements advocating for victims' rights, systemic reform, and stronger safeguards against exploitation and corruption. The case became a defining moment, a testament to the power of persistence, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of justice. As Mason stood before a gathering in memory of Danielle and all the missing, his voice steady despite the tremor of emotion beneath, he spoke not only of loss but of hope. Hope that stories buried too long would be unearthed, that voices silenced for years could rise in chorus, and that no darkness, no matter how deep, could extinguish the light of truth. He pledged to carry forward the torch until every shadow was brought into the light, every secret exposed, and every victim remembered. The journey from a single abandoned car to a sprawling network of betrayal and courage had reshaped a community, revealing the fragile yet unbreakable threads that bind humanity in the face of horror. Danielle's story, once a whisper in the void, now roared with the power to change lives, mobilize hearts, and inspire a future where silence could never again claim the innocent. Mason's fight was far from over, but in the strength of truth and the promise of justice, he found the unwavering courage to continue, turning pain into purpose and fear into fierce resolve, ensuring that the voices of the disappeared would never fade into oblivion. The aftermath of the raid on the broker's compound left an indelible mark on Mason Morgan and the community he fought to protect. The magnitude of the unmasked network's reach and depth was staggering, a sprawling empire of greed, manipulation, and cruelty meticulously built to prey on vulnerability. Yet, amid the wreckage of deceit, Mason found a renewed sense of purpose. The stories of the victims echoed louder than ever, igniting a flame of resilience that refused to be extinguished. As winter settled over the town, Mason found himself navigating a complex landscape of healing, rebuilding trust, and forging alliances to bring lasting change. The first days after the arrest were a whirlwind of testimonies and investigations. Survivors began sharing broken fragments of their ordeals, voices trembling yet resolute, each story shedding light on facets of the broker's dominion that had remained hidden for years. Among them was a young woman whose courage inspired many, a survivor freed from clandestine captivity, whose detailed account painted the broker not just as a manipulator, but as the architect of a pervasive culture of fear. Her words stitched together years of abuse, betrayals, and unspoken terror into a tapestry of human resilience and the longing for justice. Ellie Mazur's journalistic efforts intensified, her reports garnering national attention and sparking public outrage. She meticulously chronicled the intricate connections, the failures of oversight, and the endurance of those who refused to succumb to silence. Her articles exposed not only the crimes but the systemic lapses that allowed the broker's reign to persist: corruption, willful negligence, and societal blindness. Each piece wove urgency into the narrative, compelling authorities to act swiftly and decisively. Mason's role expanded beyond investigator. He became a pillar for the survivors and a symbol of unwavering determination. Community forums, support groups, and advocacy campaigns blossomed around his leadership, creating a platform where victims could find solace and strength. Months of tireless work culminated in new policy proposals aimed at strengthening protections against exploitation and ensuring the rapid response of law enforcement in cases involving potential trafficking and abuse. Mason worked closely with legislators and agencies, translating raw pain into legislative action. Yet, despite the progress, the shadow of the broker lingered, manifesting in subtler, more insidious forms. Threats against witnesses escalated, court proceedings faced obstruction, and whispers of cover-ups permeated even the highest levels of local governance. Mason knew the path toward justice was fraught, and that powerful adversaries still sought to undermine their hard-won gains. The community's vigilance became paramount. their collective voice a shield against further attempts to suppress the truth. A breakthrough came when a secure lead traced financial transactions directly linking the broker's operations to regional officials who had previously evaded scrutiny. This prompted a federal investigation that revealed a network of complicity far beyond initial estimates, an intricate web woven through law enforcement, business elites, and political figures. The broker's capacity to corrupt had been vast, but so was the resolve of those dedicated to unraveling his empire. Throughout the trials that followed, Mason stood with survivors as witness after witness bravely recounted their stories, their testimony piercing the veil of intimidation and illuminating the shadows. The legal battles were long and arduous, marked by moments of despair and triumph alike. Each conviction was a victory against the pervasive darkness, each sentence a message that exploitation and silence would no longer be tolerated. Parallel to the judicial proceedings, community healing took center stage. Memorials and commemorative events celebrated the strength of those who endured and the memories of those lost. Mason collaborated with mental health professionals to establish support programs tailored to the unique traumas borne by survivors, recognizing that justice was only the foundation for true recovery. Schools, churches, and local organizations rallied to provide resources, education, and awareness to prevent future tragedies. Mason, however, knew that the battle wasn't merely against individuals, but against the systemic inequities and cultural stigmas that allowed exploitation to thrive unseen. He became an emotive speaker, using his platform to advocate for transparency, accountability, and societal change. His voice carried the weight of countless stories. His actions inspired a generation to confront uncomfortable truths and demand better protections for the vulnerable. In quiet moments, Mason reflected on the journey, from a single abandoned Camaro to an unbroken chain of truth and courage stretching across time. Danielle's voice, once voiceless in the echoes of dust and silence, had become a clarion call, a testament to the power of remembrance and the imperative of justice. The smiley face, once a symbol of dread, was reclaimed as a beacon of hope and resilience, forever tied to the promise that no story would ever again be left forgotten in the shadows. The fight forged new bonds across communities and generations, a mosaic of strength born from suffering and commitment. Mason recognized that justice, while vital, was but one chapter in an ongoing narrative where healing, awareness, and action must remain constant. The network unraveled, but vigilance must endure, because every victory in the light casts back the darkness, reminding all that the fight for truth is eternal. And so Mason Morgan stood steadfast, a guardian of memory and a beacon for those who could not fight for themselves, carrying forward the legacy of courage born in the heart of a 12-year silence, shattered at last, a lasting vow that the lost would never be forgotten, and that light, no matter how faint, will always find a way to pierce through even the deepest darkness. The echo of the shattered silence continued to ripple through Mason Morgan's world, drawing him into a realm where the lines between justice and vengeance blurred dangerously. The broker's empire, once masked by whispers and threats, lay exposed in the harsh light of day, yet the battle was far from over. With each arrest and conviction, Mason felt the tendrils of corruption recoil, only to reveal new depths of rot beneath the surface. This was a war not just against individuals, but against a system entrenched in power and complicit in perpetuating darkness. Months into the investigation, Mason found himself facing the sobering reality of the toll exacted by the relentless search for truth. Friends were lost to fear and intimidation. Witnesses recanted under pressure, and the corridors of power twisted with veiled threats aimed at crushing the movement for justice. Yet, amidst this shadow, the community's resolve only hardened. Survivors formed coalitions, advocates rose to prominence, and voices once silenced now filled the airwaves and courtrooms alike. Ellie Mazur's relentless journalism played a pivotal role in sustaining the momentum. Her articles revealed the intricacies of the broker's network in detail, the hidden trails of money, the manipulation of officials, the harrowing stories of victims. National news picked up on her scoops, amplifying the call for accountability. Public demonstrations flooded the streets, demanding transparency and reform. Mason's unwavering presence as a beacon of hope inspired many to stand up against the darkness. But the broker was no mere shadow. He was a force seeking to reassert control. Mason began receiving anonymous warnings, cryptic phrases carved into surfaces, threatening notes slipped under doors, mysterious figures observed lurking in the periphery. The broker's reinforcements were maneuvering to stifle the rising tide of dissent. Law enforcement officers who had shown allegiance to Mason's cause were suddenly reassigned or faced unexplained harassment. The lines between friend and foe blurred ominously, and paranoia seeped into every encounter. In the eye of this storm, Mason's focus sharpened. He knew that dismantling the broker's legacy required more than arrests. It demanded uprooting the culture that allowed such evil to flourish. Mason collaborated closely with legal teams and victim support organizations to create education programs targeting vulnerable communities and institutions. Workshops on recognizing manipulation and fostering resilience became widespread. The movement was evolving from reactive response to proactive prevention. Through countless sleepless nights and tireless hours, Mason kept Danielle's memory alive, her voice a guiding light amid the darkness. He championed memorials not just as ceremonies of mourning, but as beacons of hope, urging society to confront uncomfortable truths and prevent further tragedies. His tireless advocacy resonated nationwide, inspiring legislative changes and the formation of task forces dedicated to fighting trafficking and exploitation. Meanwhile, deeper investigations unveiled the broker's network's immense financial reach. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, and intricate money laundering schemes were untangled piece by painstaking piece. This evidence was crucial in prosecuting not only the operatives on the ground, but the financiers who funded and enabled the atrocities. The scope of corruption laid bare stirred shock and disbelief, but also fueled societal demand for justice. The prosecutor's office, fortified by Mason's unyielding perseverance and the overwhelming evidence compiled by Ellie's team, eventually secured a series of landmark convictions. High-ranking officials, previously protected by layers of bureaucracy, found themselves accountable before the law. The trials captivated the nation, bringing long overdue reckoning and validating the voices of survivors who had endured unimaginable pain for too long. Yet Mason understood that the path ahead was not without peril. The broker's remnants sought to regroup, and the systemic issues enabling such darkness required ongoing vigilance and reform. Mason worked tirelessly with community leaders, policymakers, and survivors to build sustainable systems of protection and justice, ensuring that the horrors Danielle endured would not be repeated. In moments of quiet reflection, Mason would return to the memories that fueled his fight: the laughter of a sister lost too soon, the courage of survivors who faced their nightmares head-on, the collective strength of a community refusing to be broken. The smiley face once carved in dust and fear had transformed into a symbol of resilience and unity, reminding all who dared to look that even the darkest night gives way to dawn. The story that began with an abandoned car and a heartbreaking disappearance had evolved into a legacy of courage, change, and unyielding hope. Mason's journey was a testament to the power of truth and the human spirit, a call to action that echoed far beyond the confines of a single tragedy. The voices of the lost, once whispers in the shadows, now roared with the promise that justice, no matter how delayed, would never be denied. And in this promise, Mason found his unwavering purpose: to be the guardian of memory, the champion of justice, and the relentless seeker of light in the face of darkness. The echoes of justice reverberated through the town and beyond, but for Mason Morgan, the journey was far from over. The battle against the broker's network had ignited a fire within the community, exposing weaknesses in the system and unearthing hidden pain that begged for healing. Every victory in the courtroom and every dismantled stronghold was a triumph, yet the scars left behind by years of manipulation and cruelty demanded attention, care, and perseverance. Mason found himself at the forefront of a movement, one calling for accountability, reform, and unwavering support for survivors. Each day brought new challenges, as the aftermath of the revelations stirred a wave of societal awakening mixed with resistance from entrenched powers. Mason worked hand in hand with local organizations, mental health professionals, and activists to develop comprehensive programs aimed at empowering the vulnerable. Awareness campaigns educated communities about the signs of exploitation and the importance of swift intervention. Survivors found solace in support groups where their stories were honored, their voices amplified, and their healing journeys nurtured. Ellie Mauser's relentless reporting continued to shine a light on the dark corners once thought impenetrable. Her stories humanized the statistics, telling the tales of bravery and suffering with compassion and integrity. National media joined the chorus, resulting in policy changes, increased funding for victim services, and strengthened law enforcement training. The Brokers Network became a catalyst for broader discussions on systemic failures and the urgent need for vigilance. However, Mason knew the shadows would not simply dissipate. The remnants of the brokers' influence lingered like a specter, manifesting in subtle barriers to change, intimidation of witnesses, and silent complicity in powerful circles. Mason remained vigilant, aware that true justice required unwavering commitment, not just to punishment, but to transformation. He championed transparency in government and corporate practices, advocating for reforms that would prevent the rise of such insidious networks in the future. In the quiet hours, Mason reflected on the path he had walked, the pain endured, the traumas uncovered, and the extraordinary courage witnessed. The smiley face, once a symbol of torment, had been reclaimed as a mark of resilience, a testament to the enduring human spirit that refused to be broken. Mason's dedication embodied the promise that no voice would ever again be silenced by fear or forgotten in the shadows. He became a mentor, guiding new advocates and survivors alike, sharing hard-earned wisdom and fostering the next generation of defenders. His story intertwined with theirs, each a thread in a tapestry of hope and renewal. Together, they forged a community bound not by suffering, but by shared determination to protect, empower, and uplift. The fight that began with an abandoned car and a terrifying secret had transformed into a movement, a beacon for those lost in darkness, a rallying cry for justice, and a promise of a future where light prevails. Mason's unwavering purpose was no longer just a personal mission, but a communal crusade, a testament to the power of truth and the resilience born from the deepest trials. As the sun set over the town, casting long shadows that once harbored silence and fear, Mason stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. For in every heart touched, in every life changed, and in every truth revealed, there was a quiet but unbreakable victory. The story of Danielle Morgan, once a whisper lost in time, now resonated as a legacy eternal, a call to arms for justice, compassion, and the unyielding quest to ensure that no one's story ever again fades into the silence. The journey that began with an abandoned black Camaro and a whispered name had grown into a testament of resilience, courage, and relentless pursuit of justice. Mason Morgan's path was no longer just a search for his sister Danielle, but a beacon for countless others lost in the shadows. As spring warmed the air and blossoms began to push through the thawed earth, Mason found himself standing at the threshold of a new chapter, not just for himself, but for a community forever changed by the truths unearthed. The years of investigation, trials, and healing had morphed into a collective movement grounded in hope and the determination to build a future where exploitation could no longer hide behind silence. Mason's role shifted toward advocacy and education, collaborating with lawmakers, mental health experts, and activists to design systems focused on prevention and support. His efforts helped establish survivor resource centers offering counseling, legal aid, and empowerment workshops, turning trauma into transformation. Ellie Mazur's fearless reporting continued to penetrate hearts and minds nationwide. Her narratives, honoring the bravery of survivors and exposing the depths of systemic failures, fueled a growing chorus demanding transparency and accountability. Her partnership with national media propelled reforms and inspired legislation designed to dismantle human trafficking networks and protect vulnerable communities. Yet, Mason understood the fight's complexity. The broker's legacy lingered in the social, political, and cultural fabric, showing that change required persistent vigilance. The battle against corruption and complicity was ongoing, necessitating community collaboration and resilience. Mason worked to foster dialogues bridging law enforcement, policymakers, and grassroots organizations, nurturing a culture ready to confront uncomfortable realities and champion justice. Mason's advocacy inspired the emergence of new voices, survivors stepping forward with courage, leaders emerging from the community's heart, and allies forging alliances across sectors. Memorials and annual remembrances for Danielle and others enshrine their stories, transforming pain into purpose and grief into solidarity. These gatherings reinforce the commitment to never allow silence or fear to erode the truth again. As Mason looked into the eyes of survivors now finding strength in community and justice in courts, he found profound meaning in the interconnectedness of resilience. Each story shared, each victory won, shaped a legacy far beyond individual loss, a mosaic of humanity's enduring spirit. The smiley face, once a mark of menace traced in dusty car hoods, had become a symbol of defiance, survival, and hope. Reflecting on the journey, Mason embraced the truth that healing was a lifelong process, one requiring patience, compassion, and unshakable resolve. He vowed to remain a steadfast guardian of stories silenced for too long, a voice for those still unheard, and an advocate tirelessly working to turn history's darkest chapters into lessons of courage and change. The fight that began with the mystery of an abandoned car had ignited a revolution of awareness, a call for justice echoing far beyond the borders of their small town. Mason Morgan's unwavering dedication transformed tragedy into triumph, despair into hope, and silence into a collective roar demanding a brighter, safer future. As the sun set, casting golden hues over the renewed landscape, Mason stood tall, an emblem of persistence and hope. Beneath the warmth of the fading light, he held close the promise that no story, no victim, no voice would ever again be lost to the void. Danielle's journey, and those of many others, had sparked change, a lasting reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, would always find a way to break free and enlighten the world. As the seasons turned and the community's pulse grew stronger with newfound awareness, Mason Morgan reflected on the profoundly transformative journey that had unfolded before him. The darkness that once loomed over Danielle Morgan's disappearance had been pierced by relentless pursuit, but the path was paved with bittersweet victories and ongoing challenges. The fight for justice was no longer private grief imprisoned in shadowy alleys, but had blossomed into a communal cause that demanded continuous nurturing, vigilance, and courage from everyone affected. With the brokers' network all but dismantled and key perpetrators behind bars, Mason dedicated himself to ensuring that the voices of those who suffered would not fade into silence again. He spearheaded initiatives to weave victim support into the very fabric of local institutions, schools, healthcare facilities, law enforcement agencies, and community organizations were emboldened to recognize signs of exploitation and intervene early. Training programs, survivor-led panel discussions, and community outreach initiatives transformed desperation into empowerment as trauma survivors helped guide new protective frameworks. Ellie Mazur's work transcended front-page news. She authored investigative reports that laid bare systemic failures and illuminated the courage of those whose stories had been buried too long. Her writings sparked widespread public discourse and fueled widespread legislative reforms that held accountable every layer of concealment and corruption once protecting the broker's empire. In countless interviews and appearances, Ellie reminded the nation of the human cost behind the headlines, urging collective responsibility and sustained action. Yet, Mason understood the delicate balance between justice and healing. The lingering shadows of trauma could not be banished with arrests alone. He worked tirelessly with mental health professionals to design comprehensive rehabilitation programs tailored to survivors' nuanced needs, recognizing the slow, often painful journey toward reclaiming one's life. Community centers dedicated to wellness provided safe havens where survivors could receive therapy, share stories, and build futures rooted in strength rather than fear. The systemic corruption that permitted such darkness required dismantling through legal and cultural reform. Mason advocated for transparency in governance and challenged the complacency that allowed exploitative networks to flourish. Collaborating with civic leaders, he helped establish watchdog groups to monitor accountable enforcement of justice and policy. Efforts to educate youth on consent, boundaries, and human rights took root in schools, fostering awareness that would guard the next generation from similar fates. Memorials blossomed as poignant sites of remembrance and resilience. Every year, the community gathered to honor Danielle Morgan and the many other lost or silenced voices. Flowers laid, prayers shared, and stories retold. These gatherings forged unity, reminding all that beneath every tragedy lies a call to protect, remember, and change. The smiley face once etched in dust as a symbol of fear was reclaimed as a mark of defiance and hope, a stark reminder that even the bleakest warnings can herald the dawn of justice. Survivors like Mason and Ellie became mentors and champions, sharing their journeys to inspire others facing shadows of their own. They uplifted stories of survival, fostering networks of solidarity that spanned far beyond their town's borders. Together they forged a legacy that transcended pain, a testament that the human spirit's relentless yearning for freedom and dignity can overcome even the deepest darkness. Through it all, Mason found strength in the collective heartbeat of his community, the shared commitment to ensure no victim's story ended in silence. No perpetrator escaped accountability, and no child walked alone into the unknown. The journey that began with a simple question about a missing sister had become a beacon of light guiding many toward justice and healing. As Mason looked toward the horizon, where the sun painted the sky with hues of hope and renewal, he carried within him the indelible promise that justice was a living, breathing force, one sustained by every voice raised in truth and every hand extended in grace. Danielle's memory was no longer a whisper lost to time, but a clarion call fueling a relentless quest for justice that would endure across generations. In the quiet moments amidst the clamor of change, Mason understood the profound truth of his journey, that even amidst the darkest shadows, light persists, hope endures, and together, humanity can rise, breaking the chains of silence forever. The story of Danielle Morgan, once a fragile thread in the tapestry of loss, now pulsed with life, a testament to courage, compassion, and the unyielding power of truth to transform hate into healing. The unraveling of Danielle Morgan's story had transcended a mere investigation. It had blossomed into a movement, a beacon that called to the deepest sense of justice and humanity within the community and beyond. Mason Morgan, once simply a brother seeking answers, now stood as a pillar of hope and resilience, his life irrevocably bound to a cause larger than himself. The network the broker had woven was shattered, but its tendrils reached into foundational structures, demanding vigilance and reform that would reverberate for generations to come. Mason's days became a whirlwind of advocacy, counseling, and collaboration. The survivors who once hid in fear now found courage in unity, speaking at schools, councils, and rallies. Their stories, once fragmented and silent, became powerful testimonies demanding systemic change. Health professionals specialized in trauma emerged, working alongside law enforcement to ensure sensitive, holistic support. This integrative approach began to heal wounds long thought irreparable, sewing threads of trust through the fabric of a community forever altered. Simultaneously, Mason took on a mentorship role, his personal journey inspiring activists and survivors facing similar battles. Through workshops, public speech, and one-on-one guidance, he fostered new leaders, equipping them with the tools necessary to dismantle residual barriers and prevent future cycles of exploitation. His story became a cornerstone of hope, a testament that even the deepest darkness could not extinguish the human spirit's light. Ellie Mazer continued her fearless journalism, her articles garnering national acclaim and catalyzing legislation. She chronicled the ongoing efforts to enforce harsher penalties, enhance victim protections, and improve survivor resources, turning public empathy into concrete progress. Ellie's narrative of Soive illuminated the systemic roots of vulnerability, urging society to confront uncomfortable truths with compassion and resolve. Yet Mason recognized that the fight extended beyond courts and campaigns. It demanded cultural transformation, altering attitudes, dismantling stigmas, and empowering communities to foster safety and respect. Mason partnered with educators to craft programs that instilled values of consent, respect, and human dignity, planting seeds that promised a healthier future. These efforts cultivated a society more vigilant, more compassionate, and better equipped to shield its most vulnerable. Honoring Danielle and the countless others, memorials and annual remembrances became sacred rites of solidarity. Flowers, music, and shared memories wove a tapestry of collective resilience, affirming the community's refusal to forget. The smiley face, once a mark of menace, became a symbol of defiant hope, marking the triumph of light over shadow. Mason felt this transformation deeply, knowing each memorial was both an end and a new beginning. The legal system, urged by public pressure and overwhelming evidence, enacted sweeping reforms. New laws targeted trafficking networks with unprecedented vigor, closing loopholes and fortifying enforcement. Judges, lawmakers, and law enforcement officials underwent intensive training to respond sensitively and effectively to exploitation cases. Partnerships between agencies multiplied, ensuring coordinated, comprehensive responses that prioritize victim safety and perpetrator accountability. Despite progress, Mason remained vigilant. The history of concealment and power abuse had taught him the cost of complacency. He continued fostering a network of support, watchfulness, and education, building a foundation robust enough to resist regression and sturdy enough to champion justice long after his own journey ended. Through community centers, advocacy groups, and grassroots efforts, he nurtured a culture unwilling to tolerate silence and injustice. The survivors, Mason realized, were the bound heart of this transformation. Their resilience fueled change and their voices shaped the future. Their courage in confronting pain, reclaiming narrative, and demanding justice provided a roadmap for healing that transcended individual tragedy. Mason saw in their stories the true victory, the unwavering human spirit breaking chains and lighting the way for others. As spring bloomed anew, Mason stood amidst a community reborn from struggle and sacrifice. The battle had been fierce, the costs real, but the legacy was enduring. The story of Danielle Morgan and the many whose lives she touched had become a testament to courage, to commitment, and to the indomitable power of truth. Mason's resolve was unbreakable, his purpose clear: to guard memory, champion justice, and ensure that no shadow would ever again silence a plea for help. Looking toward the horizon, Mason felt the weight and grace of the collective journey. The fight persisted, layered and complex, but hope flickered brighter than ever. Danielle's name, once whispered in fear, now rang loud and clear, a symbol of resilience, a call to action, and a beacon of unwavering light guiding those lost souls home. Mason's story, intertwined with hers, was no longer just a personal quest, but a call to humanity to rise, to remember, and to heal. In the quiet moments of reflection, surrounded by a community united in a future forged from brokenness, Mason understood the profound truth that lay at the heart of all their struggles, that beneath every tragedy was the potential for transformation. Beneath every loss was the seed of hope, and beneath every silence was the promise of a voice that refuses to be silenced. The story of Danielle Morgan, immortalized in courage and truth, would remain a beacon, an eternal flame against the darkness stretching across time and memory. The years that followed Danielle Morgan's disappearance were marked not only by the pursuit of justice, but also by the quiet courage of a community learning to heal. For Mason Morgan, the journey was one of transformation, from a brother seeking answers to a leader shaping the future. The wounds left by the past remained deep, but with each step forward came a renewed commitment to ensure that no voice would ever again be silenced in the shadows. Mason's role expanded into advocacy and education, collaborating with grassroots organizations, lawmakers, and mental health professionals. Together, they established networks of support designed to empower survivors and educate communities about recognizing and preventing exploitation. Workshops and public forums became platforms for survivors to share their stories, turning pain into collective strength and building bridges toward healing. Ellie Mazur's journalism continued to illuminate the darkest corners of the brokers' network and systemic failures. Her reporting brought national attention to the issue, inspiring legislative reforms and increased funding for victim services. Ellie's unwavering dedication ensured that the stories of survivors were told with dignity and respect, fueling a broader movement for change. Alongside these efforts, Mason worked tirelessly to address systemic corruption and complacency. He advocated for transparency and accountability within local government, law enforcement, and social services. His efforts contributed to the formation of task forces dedicated to dismantling networks of exploitation and ensuring rapid response and protection for vulnerable populations. The community's annual remembrances for Danielle and other victims evolved into powerful symbols of resilience and hope. These gatherings honored the memories lost and the lives forever changed, fostering a sense of solidarity and shared purpose. The once menacing smiley face, traced in the dust of Danielle's abandoned Camaro, was reclaimed as a symbol of defiance and the enduring human spirit. Legal victories, though significant, were viewed by Mason as steps toward larger cultural and social transformation. He championed programs in schools promoting education on consent, respect, and human rights, aiming to prevent future generations from falling victim to similar horrors. Survivors became mentors and advocates, their voices shaping a more informed and compassionate society. Despite the progress, Mason remained vigilant. The shadows of the broker's influence lingered, and the fight for justice required sustained effort and unwavering dedication. He continued to support survivors navigating the complexities of healing, ensuring that resources remained accessible and comprehensive. Mason's journey reflected the resilience of a community determined to rise from grief and injustice. The story that began with a single lost sister had ignited a movement, one defined by courage, healing, and the relentless pursuit of truth. As the sun set over a town transformed, Mason knew the battle was ongoing. But so too was the hope that light would always find a way to break through even the darkest night. Danielle's legacy, as a voice, a memory, and a symbol, endured in the hearts of those who refused to forget. Mason's unwavering commitment ensured that her story and those of countless others would continue to inspire change. The fight for justice was not just a moment, but a movement, a promise that silence would no longer triumph over truth, and that every lost voice would be heard at last. The story of Danielle Morgan and the hidden horrors unveiled around her disappearance had by now transformed into a beacon of enduring strength and a clarion call for justice that resonated far beyond the borders of her small town. Mason Morgan, once simply a grieving brother, had become the heart of a communal crusade, his journey entwined with countless others, awakening to the need for change and awareness. But the path forward held complexities and trials as profound as those faced in the beginning, a reminder that justice is a marathon, not a sprint. In the quiet moments before dawn, Mason often found himself reflecting on the extraordinary transformation that had taken root. He remembered those first days of uncertain hope, reading Danielle's last messages, uncovering coded warnings, and piecing together threads of a dark tapestry woven with deceit and cruelty. Each step in the journey had brought new revelations, fierce opposition, and moments of fragile triumph. Now surrounded by a resilient community of survivors and advocates, Mason realized the battle was as much about healing as it was about punishment, a delicate balance demanding compassion, patience, and unyielding determination. The establishment of survivor networks became a cornerstone of this healing process. Together with mental health professionals, Mason helped build spaces where survivors could share their stories without fear or judgment, safe havens dedicated to building trust and reclaiming dignity. These networks thrived on shared experience and collective support, providing tools for coping, empowerment, and advocacy. Mason witnessed firsthand the transformative power of these connections, where whispers of pain turned into songs of hope. Ellie Mazur's journalism expanded its reach, giving voice to those stories with accuracy and heart. Through documentaries, in-depth articles, and community engagement, she exposed systemic flaws and celebrated individual acts of bravery. Her work inspired legislative changes that strengthened anti-trafficking laws, improved victim protection, and mandated comprehensive law enforcement training on handling exploitation cases. She tirelessly challenged societal apathy, ensuring that the lessons of Danielle's case would resonate for generations. Mason's collaboration with policymakers was pivotal, pushing for transparency and accountability at every level. He testified before committees, contributed to task forces, and worked to embed survivor perspectives into policymaking. His advocacy catalyzed the formation of multi-agency partnerships designed to detect, intervene, and dismantle trafficking and abuse networks swiftly. These systemic reforms sought to turn the painful memories of the past into safeguards for the future. Community engagement flourished as well. Educational programs in schools taught young people about consent, respect, and the signs of manipulation. Workshops and public forums invited families to join the conversation, fostering a culture of vigilance and empathy. Mason championed these initiatives with unwavering commitment, believing that true prevention arose from awareness and education. The small town, once shadowed by silence and fear, began to pulse with the promise of change. Annual memorials for Danielle and the many others lost became profound moments of reflection and solidarity. Participants shared stories, poems, and music, turning grief into a collective force for justice. The smiley face, once a mark of menace etched in dust, was embraced as a symbol of courage and resilience, a reminder that even the darkest symbols can be reclaimed and transformed. Mason often spoke at these events, his voice steady, his message clear. Remembrance fuels the fight, and every lost life demands justice. Legal battles continued, drawing attention from regional and national authorities. Mason worked closely with prosecutors and investigators to navigate the complexities of bringing powerful figures to justice. While many perpetrators faced conviction, Mason understood that true justice extended beyond courtroom victories. It required societal change, ongoing support for survivors, and commitment to uprooting the culture that enabled exploitation. The fight had forged unexpected alliances. Law enforcement officers, once skeptical, became dedicated partners. Community leaders, medical professionals, and educators rallied around the cause, embodying a united front against abuse. Survivors transformed into advocates, their voices shaping policy and culture alike. Mason's vision of a community shielded from exploitation began to take form, concrete and unshakable. Yet Mason never underestimated the work ahead. He knew that vigilance must be perpetual and that the shadows of silence and complicity could return if neglected. The brokers' network, though dismantled, was a stark lesson in the resilience of evil and the need for steadfast resolve. Mason remained committed to fostering awareness, empowering survivors, and ensuring that every broken story found its voice and every injustice its reckoning. As the sun rose over a town forever changed, Mason stood on the precipice of a new era, one of hope, healing, and justice. Danielle's story, once a whispered secret veiled in fear, had become a legacy of courage and transformation. Mason understood that the fight was never truly over, but with every voice raised and every life touched, the tide continued to turn. He embraced the profound truth that had guided his journey, that even in the deepest darkness, the human spirit shines bright, that healing is possible, and that justice, though slow, is relentless. The story of Danielle Morgan, and the countless others entwined with hers, would endure as a testament to the power of truth, unity, and unwavering love, a beacon for all who dare to confront the shadows and demand a brighter, safer future. Over the many months that stretched into years, the ripple effect of justice for Danielle Morgan and countless others reached far beyond Mason Morgan's initial quest for answers. What began as a personal search for a missing sister evolved into a monumental movement, forever altering the community and inspiring waves of change across the nation. Mason, once overwhelmed by grief and confusion, had become a symbol of unwavering courage and an embodiment of hope for all victims of exploitation and silence. The battle was far from easy, but the progress was undeniable, a tapestry woven from threads of pain, resilience, and relentless pursuit of the truth. Mason's days were now filled with tireless advocacy and outreach. He worked closely with local, state, and federal agencies to establish comprehensive networks of victim support and prevention. These networks provided survivors with access to counseling, legal assistance, educational programs, and pathways to reclaim their autonomy. Mason's role had expanded beyond investigator to mentor and community leader, offering guidance to those stepping forward from the shadows. The sense of unity he cultivated inspired others to join the fight, transforming isolated voices into a collective roar, demanding systemic reform. Ellie Mazur's groundbreaking journalism continued to play a pivotal role in maintaining public awareness and pressure on authorities. Through in-depth investigative series, documentaries, and real-time reporting, Ellie humanized the survivors' stories and exposed the systemic failures that had allowed the brokers' network to flourish undetected for so long. National and international media coverage amplified the call for justice, resulting in legislative reforms enhancing protections for vulnerable populations and imposing harsher penalties on traffickers and their enablers. Ellie's work reminder how steadfast journalism can ignite action and accountability. In tandem, Mason collaborated with policymakers, educators, and social workers to develop training programs and community education initiatives focused on consent, exploitation awareness, and prevention strategies. Schools embrace these programs, fostering a culture of respect and vigilance amongst youth, while community forums engage families and leaders in critical conversations about safeguarding and empowerment. Mason believed that education was the cornerstone of lasting change, a means to prevent the cycles of abuse and neglect that had perpetuated so much pain. Annual memorial events honoring Danielle and all victims became powerful symbols of resilience and hope. These gatherings united the community in reflection, celebration of survivors, and commitment to vigilance. The smiley face, once etched as a message of menace, transformed into an emblem of defiance and courage, reminding all that adversity could be confronted and overcome. Mason's speeches at these events underscored the importance of memory, both as a tribute to loss and as a beacon guiding the path forward. The legal achievements, though significant, represented only part of the journey. Mason understood that justice was multifaceted. It required healing broken spirits, dismantling systemic corruption, and nurturing a society that refuses to turn a blind eye to exploitation. He coordinated with mental health professionals to ensure survivors received the tailored care necessary to rebuild their lives, addressing trauma with empathy and expertise. This holistic approach recognized that true justice is measured not only by convictions, but by the restoration of dignity and hope. Mason also remained fiercely aware of the ongoing threats facing survivors and advocates. The remnants of the broker's influence continued to exert pressure through intimidation and obstruction. Mason fortified protective alliances, leveraging media attention, legal safeguards, and community solidarity to shield those at risk. He tirelessly advocated for policies that enhance witness protection and support safe reporting channels, understanding that the fight against such entrenched evil required unwavering vigilance. Throughout this transformative period, Mason's own resilience was a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure and prevail. His journey was marked by moments of profound grief and extraordinary courage, reflections that fueled his unwavering dedication. The faces of survivors, their stories etched deeply in his heart, propelled him onward, reminding him that every step toward justice illuminates the path for those still lost in darkness. As the community healed, Mason's work reverberated beyond geographical boundaries. His story inspired regional and national coalitions addressing trafficking and exploitation. Conferences, training sessions, and collaborative initiatives spread knowledge and resources far and wide, fostering a network of committed individuals united by the mission to safeguard the vulnerable and deliver justice without compromise. In the quiet moments between public appearances and advocacy, Mason often returned to Danielle's voice. Recorded messages that had once been a haunting plea now resounded as a call to action, a reminder of why silence must never prevail. His unwavering vow was to ensure that no story, no matter how painful or hidden, would be lost to time or fear. The battle had reshaped the landscape of justice and compassion, forging a legacy grounded not only in accountability, but in empathy and empowerment. Danielle's journey, reflected in the courage of survivors and the unyielding efforts of champions like Mason and Ellie, embodied the enduring power of truth. Their stories lit a beacon that no darkness could extinguish, a testament to human dignity and the relentless pursuit of justice. In the twilight of this profound chapter, Mason stood with a heart full of hope and determination. He embraced the profound realization that the fight for justice is eternal, an ever-evolving journey fueled by love, resilience, and the indomitable will to shine a light into the darkest corners. Danielle's memory would forever serve as a guiding star, a symbol of courage that ignites change, and a promise that every lost voice will one day be heard, honored, and remembered. The relentless pursuit of the truth surrounding Danielle Morgan's disappearance had led Mason Morgan onto a path uncharted and fraught with danger, but also illuminated by unprecedented courage and resilience. As the legacy of the broker's dark empire crumbled piece by piece, Mason found himself standing not only as a seeker of justice, but as a guardian of stories that would shape the future of his community and beyond. The battle was no longer confined to the shadows of hidden storage units and whispered threats. It had become a nationwide call to arms against exploitation, corruption, and silence. Months after the arrests and trials had begun, Mason dedicated his efforts to strengthening the systemic response to human trafficking and abuse. Working alongside law enforcement agencies, survivor advocacy groups, and policymakers, he helped design and implement comprehensive reforms. These reforms aim to improve victim identification protocols, enhance protective services, and promote interagency coordination to ensure swift and effective interventions. Mason's collaboration with specialists in trauma care enriched survivor support programs, offering tailored therapy, education, and empowerment opportunities. Ellie Mazur's journalism maintained its vital role, providing a voice for survivors and shining a spotlight on the ongoing challenges within the legal and social service systems. Her investigative pieces revealed gaps in resources, bureaucratic obstacles, and the lingering stigma faced by many survivors. National media coverage spurred public engagement, influencing legislation that fortified anti-trafficking laws and secured dedicated funding for protective services. Ellie's reports encouraged a culture shift, fostering empathy and accountability within communities and institutions. Community education became a cornerstone of Mason's advocacy. He championed initiatives in schools to teach youth about consent, personal boundaries, and recognizing grooming behaviors. Workshops for parents and educators provided tools to create safer environments and to respond compassionately and competently when concerns arise. Mason's message emphasized prevention alongside justice, advocating for societal awareness to break cycles of abuse and neglect. Annual memorials honoring Danielle and other victims evolved into profound communal rites, a time for mourning, remembrance, and affirmation of collective resilience. Participants shared stories, poems, and music, transforming grief into solidarity. The smiley face, once a mark of terror etched in dust and despair, was reclaimed as a symbol of hope and enduring strength. These gatherings fortified community bonds and renewed commitment to protecting the vulnerable. Legal victories served as milestones on a longer journey. Mason worked closely with prosecutors to navigate complex cases, ensuring survivors' voices were central to the pursuit of justice. Convictions brought accountability, but also exposed systemic weaknesses, demanding ongoing vigilance. Mason advocated for transparency and continuous improvement within the justice system to better serve victims and deter offenders. Despite the progress, Mason recognized the need for continued vigilance. The broker's remnants and cultural complicity posed ongoing threats, requiring sustained efforts from communities, law enforcement, and policymakers. Mason supported the development of safe reporting mechanisms and witness protection programs to empower survivors and protect those brave enough to testify. Mason's personal resilience echoed through the community. His leadership inspired new advocates, survivors, and allies, fostering a movement grounded in empowerment and justice. Together, they challenged societal norms tolerant of exploitation, working to create a culture of respect and protection. As the sun rose on a transformed town, Mason reflected on the journey, a narrative of loss, bravery, and hope. Danielle's story, once a whisper in an empty driveway, had ignited a national conversation and catalyzed change. Mason's unwavering dedication ensured that no voice would be silenced, no truth buried. The fight for justice was ongoing, but the path forward was illuminated by the courage of those who refused to forget. In quiet moments, Mason found solace in the knowledge that the legacy of Danielle Morgan would endure, not as a tale of tragedy alone, but as a testament to the unyielding power of truth, compassion, and the human spirit. The smiley face, now a beacon, reminded all that in the face of darkness, light can prevail, and the voices of the lost can guide the way toward a brighter, safer future. The relentless pursuit of the truth surrounding Danielle Morgan's disappearance had led Mason Morgan onto a path uncharted and fraught with danger, but also illuminated by unprecedented courage and resilience. As the legacy of the broker's dark empire crumbled piece by piece, Mason found himself standing not only as a seeker of justice, but as a guardian of stories that would shape the future of his community and beyond. The battle was no longer confined to the shadows of hidden storage units and whispered threats. It had become a nationwide call to arms against exploitation, corruption, and silence. Months after the arrests and trials had begun, Mason dedicated his efforts to strengthening the systemic response to human trafficking and abuse. Working alongside law enforcement agencies, survivor advocacy groups, and policymakers, he helped design and implement comprehensive reforms. These reforms aim to improve victim identification protocols, enhance protective services, and promote interagency coordination to ensure swift and effective interventions. Mason's collaboration with specialists in trauma care enriched survivor support programs, offering tailored therapy, education, and empowerment opportunities. Ellie Mazur's journalism maintained its vital role, providing a voice for survivors and shining a spotlight on the ongoing challenges within the legal and social service systems. Her investigative pieces revealed gaps in resources, bureaucratic obstacles, and the lingering stigma faced by many survivors. National media coverage spurred public engagement, influencing legislation that fortified anti-trafficking laws and secured dedicated funding for protective services. Ellie's reports encouraged a culture shift, fostering empathy and accountability within communities and institutions. Community education became a cornerstone of Mason's advocacy. He championed initiatives in schools to teach youth about consent, personal boundaries, and recognizing grooming behaviors. Workshops for parents and educators provided tools to create safer environments and to respond compassionately and competently when concerns arise. Mason's message emphasized prevention alongside justice, advocating for societal awareness to break cycles of abuse and neglect. Annual memorials honoring Danielle and other victims evolved into profound communal rites, a time for mourning, remembrance, and affirmation of collective resilience. Participants shared stories, poems, and music, transforming grief into solidarity. The smiley face, once a mark of terror etched in dust and despair, was reclaimed as a symbol of hope and enduring strength. These gatherings fortified community bonds and renewed commitment to protecting the vulnerable. Legal victories served as milestones on a longer journey. Mason worked closely with prosecutors to navigate complex cases, ensuring survivors' voices were central to the pursuit of justice. Convictions brought accountability, but also exposed systemic weaknesses, demanding ongoing vigilance. Mason advocated for transparency and continuous improvement within the justice system to better serve victims and deter offenders. Despite the progress, Mason recognized the need for continued vigilance. The broker's remnants and cultural complicity posed ongoing threats, requiring sustained efforts from communities, law enforcement, and policymakers. Mason supported the development of safe reporting mechanisms and witness protection programs to empower survivors and protect those brave enough to testify. Mason's personal resilience echoed through the community. His leadership inspired new advocates, survivors, and allies, fostering a movement grounded in empowerment and justice. Together, they challenged societal norms tolerant of exploitation, working to create a culture of respect and protection. As the sun rose on a transformed town, Mason reflected on the journey, a narrative of loss, bravery, and hope. Danielle's story, once a whisper in an empty driveway, had ignited a national conversation and catalyzed change. Mason's unwavering dedication ensured that no voice would be silenced, no truth buried. The fight for justice was ongoing, but the path forward was illuminated by the courage of those who refused to forget. In quiet moments, Mason found solace in the knowledge that the legacy of Danielle Morgan would endure, not as a tale of tragedy alone, but as a testament to the unyielding power of truth, compassion, and the human spirit. The smiley face, now a beacon, reminded all that in the face of darkness, light can prevail, and the voices of the lost can guide the way toward a brighter, safer future. The unfolding saga of Danielle Morgan's disappearance and the unmasking of the broker's sinister network had become an emblematic struggle, a fight that transcended individual loss to challenge the very fabric of justice and societal conscience. Mason Morgan, once a lone seeker of truth, now stood at the helm of a movement not just for justice but for systemic transformation. The path was arduous, fraught with obstacles and dark recesses of human cruelty, but infused with an indomitable spirit driving change and hope. In the wake of successive legal victories and community mobilization, Mason recognized the necessity of embedding survivor-focused approaches into every layer of societal response. He joined forces with multidisciplinary teams, mental health specialists, social workers, educators, law enforcement officers, and policymakers to create integrated support systems. These systems were designed to offer holistic care, recognizing that healing entailed emotional, psychological, and physical restoration. Survivor testimony became the cornerstone, informing trauma-informed practices that elevated dignity and agency. Ellie Mazur's continued investigative journalism played a vital role in sustaining national discourse and legislative momentum. Her exposés chronicled not only the broker's crimes, but the systemic failures that facilitated exploitation. She highlighted stories of courage, advocacy, and reform, ensuring that survivors' voices remained central. Ellie's work fostered awareness and accountability, inspiring civic engagement, and fostering a culture of vigilance against abuse and complicity. Recognizing education as the foundation of prevention, Mason championed curriculum reforms that infused schools with lessons on consent, boundaries, healthy relationships, and recognizing grooming behavior. Programs extended to parents, caregivers, and communities, promoting open dialogues and creating environments where safety and respect flourished. Mason's vision encompassed a proactive, informed society capable of identifying and halting exploitation before it could take root. Annual memorial ceremonies honoring Danielle and all whose lives were stolen became powerful catalysts for unity and reflection. These events combined remembrance with advocacy, blending stories, music, and shared commitments into communal affirmations of resilience. The smiley face, once a symbol of fear etched into dusty car hoods, was reclaimed as a beacon of hope, courage, and the enduring power of collective memory. Legal reforms, though hard-won, exposed ongoing challenges, prompting Mason and allies to advocate for continuous improvements. Enhanced protocols for victim identification, improved witness protection, and stringent accountability measures were implemented, scrutinizing law enforcement and judicial responses. Mason's advocacy fostered transparency and combated complacency, building a foundation where survivors could trust the system to uphold their rights and dignity. Despite the dismantling of the broker's network, shadowy elements persisted, underscoring the need for ongoing vigilance. Mason worked closely with community leaders, legislators, and law enforcement to cultivate spaces of safety and support, ensuring systems remained responsive and survivors empowered to speak without fear. Efforts to monitor residual threats, educate stakeholders, and foster collaboration were integral to sustaining gains. Mason's journey inspired a wave of new leadership among survivors and advocates. He mentored emerging voices, facilitating knowledge sharing and collective strategizing. Together, they expanded networks of support, advocacy, and education, reinforcing a societal commitment to protect the vulnerable and champion justice. Mason's story became an enduring testament to the transformative impact of resilience and community. Amidst these efforts, Mason reflected on the profound transformation from the isolated agony of a missing sister to a resonant movement advocating systemic change. The story of Danielle Morgan symbolized a journey from silence to spoken truth, from vulnerability to empowerment, from despair to steadfast hope. Mason embraced the responsibility of preserving these legacies, ensuring that every survivor's voice contributed to shaping a safer, more compassionate world. As seasons shifted and the community flourished in its new resolve, Mason stood firm, a guardian of memory, a catalyst for justice, and a beacon of hope. The fight, ongoing and multifaceted, was tempered by the knowledge that light, once kindled, could never be extinguished by darkness. Danielle's legacy lived on, a testament to courage, the power of truth, and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Mason's unwavering commitment ensured that this legacy would endure, inspiring future generations to confront injustice with courage, compassion, and unyielding determination. The journey that began with the disappearance of a young woman named Danielle Morgan had evolved into a profound narrative of resilience, justice, and transformative change. Mason Morgan, who once stood alone with questions and sorrow, had become a beacon for survivors and advocates, a symbol of the power of truth and the enduring spirit of community. The echoes of Danielle's story had rippled outward, touching lives, influencing policies, and awakening hearts to the urgent need for vigilance and compassion. In the wake of dismantling the brokers' network, Mason dedicated himself to building a legacy of prevention and healing. Working alongside multidisciplinary teams, he helped establish survivor resource centers that offered holistic support, combining trauma-informed therapy, legal assistance, educational outreach, and vocational training. These centers became lifelines, empowering survivors to reclaim agency and rebuild their lives with dignity. Mason's mentorship inspired emerging advocates who carried forward the mission with passion and empathy. Ellie Mazur's journalism continued to illuminate the shadows, chronicling stories of courage and exposing systemic failures. Her investigative pieces spurred public debate, inspired legislative reforms, and fostered greater accountability within institutions. Ellie's voice ensured that survivors' experiences remained central to ongoing conversations about exploitation and justice, fueling a culture of empathy and responsibility. Education emerged as a cornerstone of lasting change. Mason championed school-based programs that taught young people about consent, healthy relationships, and recognizing grooming behaviors. Community workshops engaged families and educators, creating environments of awareness and safety. These initiatives nurtured a generation equipped to challenge abuse and advocate for respect, helping to break cycles of exploitation. Annual memorials honoring Danielle and others lost became powerful rituals of solidarity and remembrance. Communities gathered to honor lives stolen too soon, to share stories of survival, and to renew commitments to protect the vulnerable. The smiley face, once a mark of menace traced in dust, was reclaimed as a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that courage can illuminate even the darkest nights. Legal advancements, though hard-fought, revealed the ongoing need for vigilance. Mason collaborated with prosecutors and policymakers to strengthen protections for victims and improve justice system responsiveness. Efforts to enhance witness protection, combat corruption, and ensure transparency were vital to building a system survivors could trust. Mason's advocacy highlighted the importance of responsive, victim-centered justice as a foundation for healing. Despite dismantling much of the broker's influence, Mason recognized that the fight against exploitation required continuous commitment. Persistent threats and systemic obstacles underscored the need for sustained community vigilance and institutional accountability. Mason worked tirelessly to reinforce supportive networks and safe reporting mechanisms, empowering survivors and protecting those willing to testify. Mason's resilience reflected a community transformed, scarred but unbroken, determined to confront past injustices and prevent future harm. His leadership inspired a new generation of advocates, fostering a movement grounded in empowerment, education, and justice. Together, they challenged societal acceptance of exploitation and fostered cultures of respect and accountability. As Mason gazed toward a horizon shaped by struggle and hope, he embraced the profound truth that justice is an enduring process fueled by collective courage and compassion. Danielle's legacy, once a whispered sorrow, had become a rallying cry, a living testament to the strength of truth and the unyielding quest for a safer, more just world. Mason's unwavering dedication ensured that no story of pain would be silenced, no light extinguished. The fight continued, but so did the promise of victory born from resilience, love, and relentless pursuit of justice. The sprawling saga of Danielle Morgan's disappearance, once a single unsolved mystery, had grown into a sweeping testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience, justice, and transformation. Mason Morgan, motivated by the loss of his sister and the shadows cast over his community, had stepped into a role far greater than he ever imagined, a symbol of hope, courage, and unyielding tenacity. His relentless pursuit of the truth exposed a network of exploitation and silence that spanned years and layers of complicity. But beyond exposing darkness, his journey became a narrative of healing and the unbreakable bonds forged through shared struggles. In the wake of revolutionary legal reforms and heightened public awareness, Mason dedicated his efforts to constructing foundations for prevention and survivor empowerment. Collaborating with mental health professionals, legal experts, educators, and community leaders, he was instrumental in developing multifaceted survivor resource centers. These centers provided trauma-informed care, legal advocacy, educational opportunities, and vocational training, enabling survivors to reclaim their lives with dignity and hope. Mason's guidance nurtured a generation of advocates, empowering them to continue the mission with passion and empathy that transcended his own efforts. Ellie Mazur's investigative journalism remained a vital force within this evolving landscape. Her powerful storytelling breathed life into survivors' voices, revealing systemic shortcomings while highlighting individual bravery and resilience. Ellie's reports catalyzed legislative action and institutional accountability, embedding survivor experiences at the heart of societal conversations on trafficking and abuse. Her unwavering commitment ensured the momentum of justice and awareness would not falter. Recognizing education as the bedrock of lasting change, Mason spearheaded initiatives integrating comprehensive lessons on consent, boundaries, and healthy relationships into school curricula. Outreach programs extended to families and educators, creating communities equipped to recognize and confront exploitation early. This proactive approach aimed to break cycles of abuse by fostering environments of vigilance, respect, and support, ensuring tomorrow's youth would be armed with knowledge and strength. Annual memorials for Danielle and countless others who vanished or suffered became profound expressions of collective memory and resistance. These gatherings honored lost lives while galvanizing commitments to systemic reform and survivor support. The smiley face, once an emblem of terror etched into dusty car hoods, was reclaimed as a symbol of defiance and collective hope, a powerful reminder that light can break through the darkest shadows. While legal victories brought crucial accountability, Mason understood that true justice required continuous advocacy and cultural transformation. He collaborated with lawmakers, law enforcement, and social service systems to enhance victim rights, improve protection mechanisms, and ensure survivors' dignity remained paramount throughout legal proceedings. These efforts reflected a shift toward compassionate, survivor-centered justice models that address both retribution and restoration. Yet, the remnants of the broker's vast influence required ongoing vigilance. Mason championed policies and community efforts to monitor and counteract lingering threats and systemic barriers. He advocated for safe, accessible reporting avenues and protective services that empowered survivors and reinforced their courage to confront perpetrators and testify. Mason's resilience echoed through the growing network of advocates and survivors, inspiring emerging leaders committed to advancing the cause. Together, they built a community resilient to silence and oppression, dedicated to fostering cultures valuing justice, dignity, and safety. Mason's journey symbolized the collective power of voices united against exploitation and the enduring hope for a more just society. Amidst moments of reflection and renewal, Mason recognized that the fight for justice was not a finite battle, but a continual journey requiring steadfast commitment, community engagement, and unwavering compassion. Danielle's story, once a silent mystery, had become a legacy of courage and change, a beacon illuminating paths toward healing and accountability. Standing shoulder to shoulder with survivors and supporters, Mason embraced his role as guardian of memory and advocate for justice. He vowed that no story of pain would be forgotten, no truth lost to time, and no voice silenced by fear. The fight endured, sustained by the power of collective courage and the promise that even the darkest nights yield to dawn's light. Danielle's legacy and the countless lives it touched would forever inspire a future where truth prevails and justice is the birthright of all. In the aftermath of the relentless pursuit for truth surrounding Danielle Morgan's disappearance, Mason Morgan found himself standing at the crossroads of profound transformation, not just for himself, but for an entire community forever changed. The journey that began with a single lost sister had blossomed into a sweeping movement for justice, healing, and systemic change. Yet the path ahead remained long and fraught with complexities, demanding unwavering resilience and the collective strength of those committed to rewriting a narrative of pain into one of hope. Mason's commitment deepened as he engaged with multidisciplinary coalitions, bringing together survivors, legal experts, mental health professionals, educators, and community leaders. Their collaboration fostered the creation of comprehensive survivor-centered programs that address the multifaceted nature of healing. Trauma-informed therapy, legal advocacy, vocational training, and educational outreach became pillars supporting survivors' journeys toward recovery and empowerment. Mason's mentorship inspired countless individuals to rise as advocates, carrying forward the torch with passion and compassion. Journalist Ellie Mazur's tireless work continued to illuminate the darker corners of systemic failure. Her storytelling humanized survivors' experiences, exposing the failures that allowed exploitation to fester and inspiring public demand for reform. National media amplified these efforts, driving legislative change, increased funding for victim services, and enhanced training for law enforcement. Ellie's voice ensured survivors remained at the forefront of the conversation, catalyzing a cultural shift toward empathy and accountability. Education emerged as a critical front in prevention. Mason championed the integration of comprehensive consent and healthy relationship programs into school curricula. Community workshops extended outreach to parents and caregivers, equipping families with tools to recognize and address signs of grooming and abuse. These efforts fostered safer environments where young people could thrive free from fear, armed with knowledge and supported by vigilant communities. The annual memorials honoring Danielle and other victims became powerful symbols of resilience and remembrance. They united survivors, families, and communities in shared reflection and advocacy. The smiley face, once a sinister symbol etched in dust, was reclaimed as an emblem of defiance and hope, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit confronting darkness. Legal strides, while significant, revealed ongoing systemic challenges. Mason worked in partnership with prosecutors and policymakers to strengthen procedures ensuring survivor safety, streamline judicial processes, and increase transparency. His advocacy underscored that justice extends beyond convictions to systemic reform and survivor empowerment. Mason remained vigilant against persistent threats from residual networks and institutional resistance. He supported development of secure reporting mechanisms and comprehensive witness protections, empowering survivors to safely share their truths and participate in justice processes. These safeguards were critical in sustaining momentum toward lasting change. Mason's personal resilience inspired a wave of new leaders. Through mentorship and collaboration, he helped cultivate a growing community of advocates who championed empowerment, education, and systemic accountability. Their collective voice challenged societal norms, fostering cultures that reject silence and tolerate no exploitation. Reflecting on the journey's transformation, Mason understood the profound impact of their efforts. Danielle's story, once lost in silence, had ignited a powerful movement transcending tragedy and inspiring change. Mason embraced his role as a guardian of memory and justice, a commitment to ensuring every voice is heard, every story honored. As the community thrived amidst challenges and triumphs, Mason's unwavering determination remained a beacon. He knew the fight for justice and healing is ongoing, a journey of resilience, compassion, and relentless hope. Danielle's legacy endured as a shining testament to courage's power to break silence, illuminate truth, and forge a future where justice prevails for all who suffer in the shadows. The tale of Danielle Morgan's disappearance had woven itself into the collective conscience of a community, transforming grief into a relentless pursuit of truth and justice. Mason Morgan, who began his journey burdened by personal loss, had emerged as a catalyst for change, a leader whose unwavering dedication had ignited a movement far beyond the boundaries of his small town. The shadows that once veiled the broker's dark empire were receding, but the path forward demanded continued courage, resilience, and unity. In the years following the exposure of the network, Mason worked tirelessly to build systems that not only responded to exploitation, but actively prevented it. Collaborating with survivors, legal advocates, mental health specialists, and educators, he helped establish survivor-centered resource centers. These centers offered comprehensive support, from trauma-informed counseling and legal assistance to educational programs and vocational training, empowering survivors to reclaim their lives with dignity and hope. Mason's mentorship fostered a new generation of advocates committed to carrying the mission forward with empathy and vigor. Ellie Mazur's investigative journalism remained a driving force in sustaining public awareness and institutional accountability. Her work humanized the survivors' experiences, exposed systemic shortcomings, and inspired legislative reforms aimed at strengthening protections for vulnerable populations. National media amplifications of these stories fostered a cultural shift toward empathy, accountability, and proactive intervention, ensuring that the voices of victims were central to ongoing conversations on trafficking and abuse. Education became a cornerstone of this transformation. Mason championed initiatives integrating comprehensive consent, boundaries, and healthy relationships education into school curricula. Community workshops extended outreach to families, equipping them with tools to recognize and respond to grooming and exploitation behaviors. These preventive measures cultivated safer environments where young people could grow free from fear, supported by informed and vigilant communities. Annual memorials honoring Danielle and other victims evolved into profound expressions of collective remembrance and resilience. These gatherings united communities in mourning, celebration of survival, and renewed commitment to protection. The smiley face, once a symbol of menace and fear etched in dust, was reclaimed as an emblem of defiance, courage, and enduring hope, a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, light can prevail. Legal victories marked significant milestones, but also highlighted the necessity for ongoing reforms. Mason collaborated closely with prosecutors and policymakers to enhance victim protections, streamline judicial processes, and ensure transparency and accountability within the justice system. His advocacy underscored that true justice encompasses not only punishment, but systemic change and survivor empowerment. Despite the dismantling of the broker's network, residual challenges persisted. Mason remained vigilant against ongoing threats and institutional obstacles, promoting the development of secure reporting mechanisms and robust witness protection programs. These measures empowered survivors to share their stories safely and contributed to sustaining progress toward a more just society. Mason's resilience resonated through a burgeoning network of advocates and survivors. His leadership inspired the emergence of new voices and strengthened communities united in their commitment to combat exploitation and foster cultures of respect and safety. Together, they challenged societal complacency and intolerance toward abuse. As Mason looked toward the future, he embraced the profound truth that the fight for justice and healing is continuous. Danielle's story, which began as a solitary cry in the void, had ignited a movement grounded in courage, compassion, and unwavering hope. Mason's enduring commitment ensured that no voice would be lost, no truth buried, and that the legacy of resilience would inspire generations to come. In moments of quiet reflection, Mason found solace in the knowledge that light, born from the darkest shadows, would continue to guide the way, ensuring that Danielle's memory and the stories of countless others would forever stand and as a testament to the power of truth, resilience, and the unbreakable human spirit. The years following the shattering revelations about Danielle Morgan's disappearance and the dismantling of the broker's shadowy network were a testament to the power of perseverance, community, and unyielding hope. Mason Morgan, who had stepped forward from personal grief into the spotlight of advocacy and justice, found himself at the leading edge of a societal transformation. The story that began with silence and shadows had turned into a beacon of courage, illuminating paths toward healing and systemic change. Mason's work evolved into a multifaceted mission centered on survivor empowerment and prevention. Collaborating with a diverse coalition of mental health experts, legal advocates, educators, and community leaders, he helped establish comprehensive support systems for survivors of trafficking and abuse. These systems offered trauma-informed counseling, legal assistance, educational programs, and vocational training. Resources designed to restore dignity and foster independence. Mason's mentorship nourished a growing movement of new advocates, survivors, and allies committed to ensuring lasting impact. Investigative journalist Ellie Mazur's reporting continued to play a vital role in this evolving landscape. Through deeply researched stories that brought survivor narratives to the forefront, she exposed systemic failures and inspired public demand for accountability. Ellie's work drove legislative reforms that strengthened anti-trafficking laws, improved victim protection services, and mandated specialized training for law enforcement. Her dedication helped foster a culture that values empathy, transparency, and prompt intervention. Education became a cornerstone of the preventive framework Mason championed. He advocated for school curricula that taught consent, boundary setting, and recognition of grooming behaviors. Community workshops reached families and educators, equipping them with knowledge and skills to protect children and vulnerable individuals. These initiatives cultivated safer environments and empowered communities to interrupt cycles of exploitation before they could take root. Annual memorial events honoring Danielle and other victims became powerful symbols of solidarity and remembrance. These gatherings united survivors, families, and communities in a shared commitment to honor lost lives and work toward justice. The smiley face, once a mark of fear scrawled in dust, was reclaimed as a symbol of hope, resilience, and defiance against oppression. These rituals reinforced community bonds and renewed dedication to safeguarding the vulnerable. Legal victories represented important milestones, but Mason recognized the ongoing need for enforcement and reform. Working closely with prosecutors and policymakers, he helped implement policies enhancing survivor protections, expediting justice, and increasing institutional transparency. Mason emphasized the importance of survivor-centered approaches that prioritize healing alongside judicial accountability. Despite the network's dismantling, residual threats and systemic challenges persisted. Mason advocated for robust witness protection programs, secure reporting mechanisms, and continued community engagement to maintain momentum. These efforts ensured survivors could safely come forward and that progress would be sustained against complacency or retaliation. Mason's personal resilience inspired countless others, helping forge a vibrant network of advocates and survivors united in mission. Through mentorship, collaboration, and shared experience, they built a community dedicated to preventing exploitation and cultivating cultures of respect and safety. Together, they challenged societal indifference and demanded comprehensive accountability for abuse. As Mason looked toward the future, he embraced the enduring truth that justice and healing are ongoing endeavors. Danielle's story, once a sorrowful whisper, had become an enduring legacy, a clarion call for truth, courage, and compassion. Mason's steadfast commitment ensured that no voice would be silenced, no story forgotten, and that the flame of resilience would guide future generations toward a safer, more just world. In quiet moments of reflection, Mason found solace and strength in the knowledge that light born from darkness would continue to shine. Danielle's memory and the voices of survivors stood as eternal reminders of humanity's unbreakable spirit, the power of truth, hope, and unyielding love to transform lives and shape a better tomorrow. The journey that began in the quiet neighborhood where Danielle Morgan disappeared had grown into a vast movement of courage, justice, and transformation. Mason Morgan, once a brother haunted by loss, now stood as a beacon of hope and resilience for countless survivors and advocates. The dark network that had concealed so many horrors was dismantled, but its echoes served as a solemn reminder of the vigilance needed to protect the vulnerable and prevent history from repeating. In the years that followed, Mason dedicated himself to weaving a safety net far broader than anyone had envisioned. Collaborating with mental health professionals, legal experts, educators, and community leaders, he helped establish comprehensive programs that address the full spectrum of survivor needs. These programs combine trauma-informed care, legal assistance, educational outreach, and vocational training to empower survivors to rebuild their lives with dignity. Mason's mentorship nurtured a new generation of advocates who carried forward the mission with unwavering passion and empathy. Ellie Mazur's investigative journalism remained instrumental in exposing lingering systemic failures and advocating for continued reform. Her stories brought survivor experiences to the forefront, inspiring national conversations and public demand for accountability. Ellie's work influenced legislation that fortified protections for victims, enhanced law enforcement training, and increased funding for supportive services. Her dedication ensured that the voices of survivors remained central to the fight against exploitation. Education became a cornerstone in Mason's vision for lasting change. He championed initiatives that integrated lessons on consent, boundaries, and healthy relationships into school curricula. Workshops for parents and educators spread awareness and equipped communities with tools to recognize and prevent abuse. These efforts cultivated environments where safety and respect were foundational values, empowering youth to protect themselves and their peers. Annual memorials for Danielle and others lost became poignant expressions of community strength and remembrance. These gatherings honored lives stolen too soon while renewing collective commitment to justice and protection. The smiley face, once a mark of fear, was reclaimed as a symbol of defiance, hope, and the enduring human spirit. Mason found these moments deeply moving, a testament to the power of memory and the resilience born from shared grief. Legal reforms marked significant milestones, yet Mason recognized the need for ongoing vigilance and improvement. Working with prosecutors and policymakers, he advocated for increased transparency, survivor-centered justice, and stronger witness protections. His efforts helped build a justice system better equipped to serve victims and deter offenders, fostering greater trust and healing. Despite dismantling much of the broker's influence, residual threats persisted. Mason worked to strengthen secure reporting channels and protective measures, ensuring survivors could safely come forward. Community vigilance and institutional accountability remain pillars in the ongoing struggle against exploitation. Mason's personal resilience inspired a burgeoning network of advocates and survivors. Through mentorship and collaboration, he helped cultivate leadership that championed empowerment, education, and systemic change. Together, they challenged societal complacency and intolerance toward abuse, forging cultures grounded in respect and accountability. As Mason looked toward the future, he embraced the profound truth that justice and healing are continuous journeys. Danielle's story, once a whisper in the void, had become a legacy of courage and change. Mason's commitment ensured no voice would be lost, no truth buried, and that resilience would guide generations forward. In moments of quiet reflection, Mason found solace in knowing light born from darkness would continue to shine. Danielle's memory and the voices of survivors stood as eternal beacons, a testament to the power of truth, hope, and the unbreakable human spirit to transcend pain and inspire a brighter, safer tomorrow. The story of Danielle Morgan, once a whispered tragedy lost amid shadows, had blossomed into a powerful narrative of resilience, justice, and unyielding hope. Mason Morgan, compelled by loss and fueled by determination, had become a guardian not only of his sister's memory, but also of countless voices silenced by fear and exploitation. His journey had transformed from a personal quest into a beacon for survivors, a catalyst for systemic change, and an inspiration for communities yearning for justice. As the echoes of the broker's dark empire faded, Mason stood amidst a community forever changed, scarred yet strengthened by shared pain and collective resolve. Together they had broken the chains of silence, confronted the shadows of complicity, and illuminated the path toward healing and accountability. But Mason knew this was only the beginning. The legacy of their struggle was profound, woven into the fabric of society through comprehensive reforms, survivor empowerment, and cultural transformation. Survivor-led initiatives flourished, providing safe spaces where healing bloomed and voices grew stronger. Educational programs seeded awareness and prevention, nurturing generations equipped to recognize and resist exploitation. Legal systems evolved to embrace compassion alongside accountability, ensuring justice was more than a verdict. It was a foundation for restoration. Through it all, Danielle's memory remained a guiding star, a symbol of courage that transcended loss, reminding all that truth illuminated even the darkest corners. The smiley face once carved in dust as a sign of fear had been reclaimed as a mark of hope and defiance. Communities gathered annually in remembrance, transforming grief into action, raising their voices in unity and remembrance. Mason's unwavering commitment inspired legions of advocates and survivors, their collective strength reshaping norms and forging cultures grounded in respect and protection. Together, they confronted complacency and called for transparency, ensuring that the voices of the lost would guide future generations towards safety and dignity. Now, as this chapter concludes, Mason turns to those who have walked this path with him, to survivors, advocates, allies, and all who cherish truth and justice. The fight for a world free from exploitation and silence continues, fueled by unity and courage. The legacy born from pain demands ongoing vigilance and collective action. If Danielle's story has touched your heart, if her journey has inspired hope or awakened a call to justice within you, join Mason and countless others who stand steadfast against darkness. Share your voice, support survivors, and advocate for change. Together, we can ensure that no story is forgotten, no victim silenced, and no light extinguished. Your engagement matters. What does Danielle's legacy inspire in you? How can we together build a future where truth reigns and justice prevails? Share your thoughts, stories, and commitments. Become part of a movement that honors the past while forging a safer tomorrow. The story is far from over. It lives in each act of courage, every whispered truth, and the collective will to make a difference. Stand with Mason, stand with survivors, and let Danielle's legacy be a beacon guiding us all toward hope, healing, and justice. Together, we rise. Together, we prevail.